This strange story began on a sunny day. An unremarkable guy came out of his house and immediately froze in place from what he saw. In front of him stood three dogs dressed as knights. When the shock passed, the hero raised his hands with the thought that everything would turn out as if he was in some kind of strange dream. After all, if this is not so, then how else can such confusion be explained? After that, he heard whose voice it was and turned his head to the right, seeing that some strange girl with blonde hair was lying under his house. She crossed eyes with this guy and asked to let her go from here if he didn't mind. The guy looked at her. If he could still survive the night's dogs, then the girl who was crushed by the house clearly indicated that he was really in some kind of strange dream. Well, I immediately began to remember the events of the previous day and night in order to find a cause and effect relationship. Last night, he was cleaning his house as if nothing had happened, while the TV was saying that today, the northern lights, which usually can only be seen in places like Greenland or Iceland, suddenly appeared in South Korea. The guy went to the window and looked in surprise at this miracle of nature, with the thought that a carefree life is the best thing in this world. However, unexpectedly his mother came up from behind and immediately slapped him on the back for shirking the cleaning. The guy immediately turned around and asked him not to do that again, and his mother began to scold him for kicking the fool instead of doing the cleaning. After that, she looked at the floor and saw that one of the photographs was lying on the floor. She immediately picked it up and wiped it, and then put it back in place. It was an ordinary family photo. After that, she began to leave the room with words for him to finish quickly, because dinner was already ready. The guy sighed heavily and said, "You think it will happen any minute." Meanwhile, the photograph which my mother had so carefully wiped off dust fell again. As soon as the cleaning was completed, the man and his mother began to have dinner and clinked glasses of beer. Mom said that it was an incredibly beautiful night today, and the guy asked in surprise why they were having dinner in his room and not in the kitchen. His mother looked out the window and explained this topic, that from here, there is a beautiful view of the lights, and they say this happens once in a lifetime and can be considered as a small holiday. The guy drank a little beer and asked, "Is she really that happy about buying a house?" The woman drowned her glass and said that this house holds a lot of their memories, including him and his father, so it's hard not to be happy in such a place. The guy smiled and said that he had a simply wonderful mother because she was actually able to buy this house, and her persistence was the same as her stupidity. The woman after these words told him not to talk like that about his own mother. After that, she hugged his hand and asked if he was still in the teenage stage. The guy immediately got scared and asked her not to remember the past. After that, he immediately kicked her out of the room and said that it was time for him to sleep. So it was time to say goodbye. The woman stood in surprise outside the door and did not understand what was happening to her son. Then she went to her room and noticed that there was some kind of envelope on the table. She came closer and saw that it was written there that this was her son's first salary. Also a postscript. He wrote on the back that he promised that he would be a good son. Looking at this, the woman smiled and thought with warmth in her soul that she had raised a good person. Having collected herself, the woman left the house and told her braiding son that she had gone on the night shift. The hero's name is Kang Nam, and he looked out the window at his mother with the thoughts that she was simply an incredible woman. After that, he lay down on the bed and raised his fist up with the words that starting from this day, this is truly their home now. After that, he woke up, went outside, and now found himself in this strange situation when three Knight's dogs are trying to attack him, and under his house lies a strange girl with trailing hair. The dogs barked at our hero, and he was surprised and asked them what they were trying to tell him. The girl who was crushed by the house said that she knew the dog's language very well, and explained that they were asking how dare an insignificant person invade the territory of the great ruler of this land. They also asked what his name was. Kang Nam said with a nervous smile that he probably played too many games of this kind, because talking dogs and a girl crushed by his house testify to an unhealthy psyche. After these words, one of the knight's dogs tried to attack Kang Nam, but he managed to dodge and the dog hit the house. The hero immediately went to the hole in the wall and said that the dogs are now obliged to pay him compensation after they damaged his house. After that, all the dogs immediately began to bark and attacked our hero, and the girl translated and said that they had nothing personal towards him, he was just a stranger. Kang Nam immediately ran into your house, saying that it didn't look like anything personal. The dogs ran after him and began to destroy his house, while the boy continued to scream in fear and run away from them. All he was thinking now was that he really missed his mother, because she would definitely be able to sort out such a strange situation. The dogs continued to bark, and the girl translated their words, saying that they were asking him not to run away and to accept his death with dignity. Kang Nam continued to run away and said that for cute dogs, they look too menacing, and asked her not to translate such threats. After these words, he jumped out the window and the girl looked at him in surprise. However, the miracle did not happen, and with all his might he fell face first into the ground. The knight's dogs immediately drank through the window and rushed right after him. Nam did not have time to get up, and the dog took advantage of the moment to swing his blade to kill this guy. But instead of finishing him off, the dog was surprised to discover that he had some strange power. After this strange energy, the man was able to throw the dog away. And throughout the area, as if the atmosphere had changed, the other dogs immediately began to run after their comrade and take him away from this place of battle. The girl was still crushed at home, and Nam couldn't find anything better than to ask her what happened, to which she briefly replied that she herself didn't understand what just happened. However, she advised the hero to turn around, and he said that he felt better that someone huge was standing there, so he clearly did not want to spoil his mood. After this, the huge monster leaned over to Nam and asked him who dared to disturb his sleep. The guy immediately moved closer to the girl and asked whose territory it was originally. The girl answered with a smile that initially this place belonged to those kobolds, but now, according to rumors, just recently someone who goes by the name of a werewolf arrived here, and as a result the ruler was removed. Nam pointed to a huge monster and asked if this guy was a werewolf, and the girl answered with a smile that it was him. The dogs immediately appeared and began to bark at this huge monster. After that, he got angry and said that kobolds are stupid creatures, and he asked them not to disturb his sleep. But they didn't do their job and dared to ask for forgiveness. After that, he put his paw on one of them and pressed it to the ground, which is why the dogs began to whine. The rest of the kobolds growled angrily and rushed to help their friend. Nam, meanwhile, looked at all this and did not understand what to do, and the girl said that if he asks her about this, then he can calm down because she also does not understand anything. Meanwhile, the werewolf turned his gaze to our hero and asked how an ordinary person dared to enter his forest because he hates this smell of rotten stench. The other dogs immediately ran up to the monster and began to apologize, and he asked them how they could allow this to happen. They continued to bark and apologize, but the monster didn't care, and he already swung his paw to finish off the dog. However, he did not succeed because one of the puppies stopped his paw with incredible efforts. Nam and the girl who was lying under his house looked at it in surprise, unable to measure that such a small puppy could cope with such weight. The puppy was clearly in great difficulty and yelped quietly. Nam asked the girl what he was talking about, and the girl said that this guy asked them to run away and says that he does not want to involve those who are not guilty in their affairs. After these words, Nam immediately began to run away. But the girl grabbed his leg and asked if he was really going to leave the one who was helping him, to which the guy replied that he didn't care because it was none of his business, and the girl continued to hold his leg and say that she was his will not let go. His opponent meanwhile continued and said that the insignificant puppy does not dare challenge him. After that, he raised his leg and swung as if in football, so that they probably dream of dying, like his relatives in their time. After that, he kicked two puppies who immediately crashed into a house near our hero. Nam immediately grabbed his head because now there were two more holes on his house. After that, he leaned over one of the puppies and said that if he was going to fight, he should do it properly. The puppy barked and gave our hero a fist, letting him know that they were now on the same team. The girl under the house said that this puppy said that with stop, incomparable to the strength that he had previously demonstrated, they could easily win. She also added that now this guy is passed out and will not say anything for sure. The werewolf, meanwhile, swung his huge paw and rushed at our hero with the words that he would regret entering his domain. Nam looked at this huge monster in horror and screamed in fear. However, for the first time in his entire life, he suddenly gained some strange confidence. The aura around him changed, and his eyes lit up with a blue light. Anyone who was nearby could feel that some changes were now taking place in his body. And even the werewolf froze in place from fear and lack of understanding of what was happening around him. The girl with pointy ears looked at everything that was happening and couldn't believe her eyes. After that, Nam hit the monster with some strange force, and he screamed in pain, asking what it was and how dare a person challenge him. After that, he wanted to attack again, but then he stopped looking at the owner of the house, who now looked incredibly cool. Nam raised his hand and concentrated his power in it and said that if the werewolf does not stop, he will be destroyed. However, the huge beast was not afraid and gathered its resolve and swung back. After that, he launched his attack, but Nam stopped the attack with just one palm. And then he concentrated all his energy and put it out from his palm, erasing this huge monster from the face of the earth. The puppy who regained consciousness looked at all this in surprise, and the girl even covered her eyes with such a bright light. After this blow, consciousness seemed to return to the hero, and he looked around in surprise. And I realized that I had left a huge destroyed area in front of my house. The puppy began to bark loudly and point his finger at the guy who had just defeated a huge monster. And the girl with pointy ears replied that she also did not understand how this happened. After that, she raised her hand and asked the master to pull her out from under this huge house with the help of his strength. Gangnam looked at her and extended his hand, beginning to concentrate his energy into it. The dog immediately began to bark loudly, and the girl said that this was not what she meant and asked her to simply raise the house. The guy walked confidently and began to walk towards these creatures, as if this was a common request for him. After that, he stuck his fingers under the house, and with all his strength, he pulled this building up. From his incredible energy, even the wind changed its direction, and the pointy-eared girl looked at him and said that this was the coolest thing she had seen in her life. After that, the dog pulled the girl out from under the house, and they all thanked the hero. Suddenly, the guy's eyes opened wide and blood began to flow from his nose, and immediately after that, he passed out. The dogs immediately began to bark and ran up to this man, along with the elf, who asked what happened to Mr. Man. After some time, Gangnam regained consciousness, and then he jumped out of bed and started screaming about some werewolf. As soon as he came to his senses, he was surprised to notice that he was in your room and everything was fine. Looking back, the guy decided that it was all just a dream. After that, he went downstairs with the thoughts that apparently he was playing too many games, and because of this, he was constantly dreaming about nonsense. However, unexpectedly, he stepped on a broken plate with his bare foot. He immediately started jumping on one leg and talking about how leaving broken dishes on the floor is very dangerous, but then he started thinking, why is the plate here? Suddenly, his cheerful mood disappeared, and he looked at the front door. And then he looked into the corridor and saw that absolutely all things were scattered here, as if a hurricane had passed through everything. He began wandering around the house back and forth and saying that he had a strange, ominous feeling. After that, he went to the door and opened it slightly with the thought that this definitely couldn't happen. But as soon as he opened the door, he saw a girl with a sharp mustache, who smiled sweetly and greeted the gentleman, glad that he had finally woken up. Going out into the yard, he looked in surprise at how the puppies were cleaning up the battle site, and the girl said that he had slept all day, so they were very worried. She also handed him one vile thing and said that wolf eyeballs are a very precious magical ingredient, so she saved it for the master. She looked into his eyes and asked, did she do a good job? The girl also added that the pancreas used for making potions also survived. Hearing all this, Gangnam fell in shock to 5th place, and the girl asked him in surprise, what is the reason for his surprise? He looked around his yard again and asked, was it all not a dream? But were they all real? Some time passed, and Gangnam watched as the puppies cleaned his house and put everything in order. He was clearly unhappy that they had destroyed his estate and went up to one of the vases that we had glued together. He looked at this terrible work and thought with bitterness that his mother treasured this flower. After that, he climbed out the window and asked what they would all do with his destroyed house. He also named the talking puppy as the main troublemaker and ordered him to raise his hands up, and the puppy immediately raised them. After that, Gangnam left his house and thought that this was real nonsense because everything that happened was not a dream, but he cannot remember all the events. After that, he approached a girl with a sharp mustache and said that he didn't believe in it, but she looked like an elf. The girl looked at him in surprise and asked how he could not believe in it. Showing her mustache, she asked him to look more carefully and he agreed, saying that she looked quite a lot like an elf. After that, Gangnam went up to the dog and said that this was the same guy who tried to kill him. He poked him in the nose and thought that these kobolds looked like ordinary dogs. The puppy barked a couple of times, and the elf explained that this guy said that he was not the descendants of Malamutes and other local dog breeds, and the girl said that her name was Moo. After that, Gangnam grabbed his head with the thoughts that he was really going crazy and fantasy games are in some sense instructive. After that, he asked the elf how she ended up under his house. Is this really in the order of things for her? The girl remembered the whole story and began to tell that, in fact, she went into the forest to pray at the world tree. Gangnam was surprised and asked us what a world tree is, and the elf asked him in response, doesn't he know about the world tree? She began to explain that in this world, the gods existing in the west and east keep the forces in balance, and a new world tree is born once every 1,000 years. And when the time comes, all living beings come here to pray. So she also came here for this. But suddenly this house fell directly on her, and just like that, she ended up under it. Gangnam, meanwhile, began to think that after this she should have died. But in the end, it turned out to be simply crushed. The puppy standing nearby slowly began to approach the hero. He handed him some kind of sunset blade and barked something. Kang Nam looked at this dog in surprise and said that he didn't understand it. The dog began to bark even more, and the elf lost words, saying that this dog says that their lands were captured by this wolf who attacked this house, so they apologize for the harm caused, and he gives him this sword as a token of gratitude for saving them. Some kind of dog in the same place said that he would now serve the hero, and was against accepting it as a gift. The elf came closer to the dog and said that she also wanted to stay with them for a while. She still needed to find the world tree. The puppy and the elf looked at the guy standing in front of them with sweet eyes. However, he refused them and said that he was going to find a way to get back home. The others also began to ask him why he was going to leave. Kang Nam immediately began to think that this was real madness. And when he woke up, he opened the front door and realized that he was in another damn world. Therefore, he needed to find a way to return home before it took too long. He tried to think how to get out of here, but the sound of the hammer began to irritate him. So he shouted at the dogs and said that they were repairing the house too loudly and asked them to knock with the hammer more quietly. The dogs were surprised but looked at him, and he said that the place here is too noisy, so he needs to go where it will be quieter. He began to leave and ordered them to fix everything before he returned. The girl meanwhile asked him where he was going to go. The elf immediately got up and started running after this guy, saying that they were going to go with him. Despite his permission, the dog also got up and quickly ran up to the hero, still holding his hands on top. Kang Nam looked at them and told them not to follow him. He also ordered them to get out of here as soon as they fix his house. Mu and the puppy remained standing and looking at the hero, and he said that he was saying it all seriously. So as soon as they subjugate the house, they should get out of here as soon as possible. After that, Kang Nam went into the forest, and the dog barked something a couple of times, and the girl said that she could probably let go of her hands. The puppy yelped something and looked down. The elf, hearing this, looked at him in surprise and asked, "Is it really so?" And the puppy nodded his head in confirmation. Meanwhile, Kang Nam walked through the forest with thoughts that he probably needs to kill some demon king or some other sunset boss, and this scares him a little. Or maybe he will need to save the kidnapped princess or find a legendary treasure. I thought about all this, but I understood that these ideas were already morally outdated. Therefore, the only thing that comes to mind is to move on. Looking deep into the forest, he thought that his mother was probably very confused. After all, she took out a loan with fate for 20 years. But as long as she had her son, she thought that everything would be okay, because some of these houses hold a lot of memories about their family, and these are her most valuable moments. After these thoughts, the guy imagined his mother standing in front of an empty space. I don't understand where her house is. He immediately grabbed his head and said that if God hears him, then he begs him to return everything as it was. However, God did not answer, and Kang Nam realized that he would have to get out of this situation himself. He immediately looked at his hand with the thoughts that he should repeat that trick. After that, he concentrated, and a huge fire immediately appeared from his hand. He was so surprised that he even swore and could not believe that he now had such powers. But suddenly the light ended, and the guy decided that it was probably due to the fact that he was not yet used to this. After standing like that for a couple of seconds, he decided that he shouldn't think about it now and began to think about how to get home quickly. He decided that it was better to think while walking. But after some time, he noticed that he had wandered too far and there was a very depressing atmosphere here. He continued to walk through the forest and suddenly noticed a strange sound. After that, he looked down and saw something glowing blue. He bent down a little to find out what was so interesting down there. Well, he immediately realized that he actually needed to look up, after which he raised his gaze. And he saw that a huge spider was hanging right above him, and its blue web was hanging down. While he was looking at this spider, some liquid dripped onto him from above, and his clothes immediately began to dissolve. Kang Nam took it off in fear and said that he didn't understand what was happening here. After that, he looked around and noticed that the spider was already very close to him and was trying to attack him. He managed to dodge, but the spider again ran up to him as close as possible. After this, the huge arthropod opened its mouth and tried to bite off our hero's head. Kang Nam was clearly scared and couldn't believe that all the spiders here were that big, and it was somehow too hardcore for him. However, he immediately remembered that in this world he has strange abilities, and such a spider would be exactly within his strength after a huge wolf. He extended his palm and advised the spider to leave here, saying that with this attack he was able to defeat the huge werewolf, and if the spider intends to stay here, then now he will see the full strength of our hero. Kang Nam concentrated the energy in his hand and warned the braid by decree that he had better run and not look back. But the spider didn't even budge. Meanwhile, the guy tried to shoot but nothing happened. He looked at his hand in surprise, and the spider looked at him in surprise. Kang Nam immediately tensed up because it didn't work, and he realized that this was his opportunity to attack and immediately shot our hero with his acid web. The guy was immediately tied up and asked, "What the hell? In this world, the web works exactly like that." He began to try to break it, locked, but nothing worked. And meanwhile, in the darkness, red eyes appeared. Kang Nam noticed them and looked in that direction. But as soon as he blinked, their size increased tenfold. They all ran up to him at great speed, and he tried to get up, not understanding why there were so many of these creatures here. These were small spiders for fifth that climbed onto the hero's body, with the thought that this was their new food, while he screamed and resisted, begging for help. However, no one could come to help because he was alone in this forest, and more spiders stopped. They ate him at sunset, and at some point the forces left our hero. However, as soon as his eyes closed, he immediately remembered his mother. However, someone used magic in front of the spider and burned a huge part of her children. The spider immediately rose into the air so that she too would not be burned. And after this technique, the guy continued to fight off the spiders and say that he hated these creatures. The elf, after casting the spell, looked at our hero and asked how he felt. After that, she immediately ran up to him and took his hand. Kang Nam thanked her and said that only thanks to her he remained alive. The girl meanwhile said that, as expected, Mr. Puppy was right, and this is a giant spider monster, as well as that who has ruled this forest for a long time. Kang Nam immediately got angry and asked why she didn't warn him, to which the girl replied that she had found out about this spider recently. And he was so quick to convince that they didn't have time to tell him everything. Kang Nam, meanwhile, continued to ask if there was a way to get rid of this creature. The girl's face immediately became serious and she asked him not to worry because, from what he learned, this spider doesn't kill for nothing. It only does it when it's hungry. Immediately after these words, a spider, mad with hunger, appeared in front of their faces, and Kang Nam noticed that she now looked quite hungry. The girl smiled and scratched her head, saying that she was probably really very hungry. Cool Kang Nam grabbed his head and asked why the girl was so calm. I asked her to do something, use some kind of magic like she did before. The elf said that it was not a problem for her to braid and immediately used the ice flow spell. However, it was of no use due to the fact that she had previously used a fire attack. And because of this, it was quite hot rolling here, and the ice immediately melted. And the spider did not even notice that someone was trying to attack her and attacked our heroes. They immediately began to run away, headlong, and Kang Nam shouted that she had only made things worse. As they walked, Moose said that she was actually just studying and began to ask what they should do. The man immediately asked not to ask him because it was his first time in this world. The girl began to cry but suddenly noticed that she was now running alone. She stopped and looked around in surprise, not understanding. Where is Mr. Man? Meanwhile, the spider immediately attacked her while she relaxed. Looking around, Mai noticed that she was standing in front of a huge monster. The girl decided to make a fool of herself and said that they could try to come to an agreement with this spider. However, judging by the scream that was heard throughout the forest, the negotiations most likely failed. Meanwhile, the puppies continued to clean up the house, but unexpectedly, the aura changed again, and they were all knocked down. Meanwhile, the main puppy was still standing and holding his hands up. Meanwhile, Kang Nam opened his eyes and looked around and saw that he was at home. He asked himself in surprise what happened. After that, he remembered that he had just fought with a spider, so he urgently needed to go and save her life. However, as soon as he tried to leave the door, he was pulled back again. The door closed and the house began to glow even brighter. The puppies looked at this in surprise. Meanwhile, a huge spider appeared behind them. Kang Nam tried to leave his room and did not understand what this strange glow was and why his door did not open. He was very worried about the little elf and thought about hoping that she, like him, had moved to another place. After that, he heard screams and immediately ran to the window and saw that a huge spider had begun to attack the puppies, who bravely accepted the battle, took up their weapons, and began to fight back, but they clearly did not succeed. The dogs continued to attack the huge one, but could not even inflict a single scratch, and Mew was tied by a web to one of the spiders. Kang Nam was very nervous and looked down, asking himself why his legs were shaking so much. Is he really afraid? After all, this has never happened to him before. Meanwhile, the main puppy continued to strike blow after blow at this spider, but he clearly wasn't very good at it. Meanwhile, Kang Nam noticed that the spider began to splash acid around the house and began to beg the spider not to touch this house because his mother would kill him. After that, Kang Nam looked at the puppy and asked him to stop giving in to this monster and kill him quickly. But it was too late, and the spider was going to eat this puppy. Kang Nam took a chair from his room and swung it to break the window. He threw a chair out the window, but nothing happened. After that, he fell exhausted to the floor after several more attempts to break the window. He was scared, and he didn't understand why it didn't break. The whole house seemed to protect him, and it seemed like he was doing it of his own free will. Suddenly, he realized what situation he was in and decided that this was probably the case. Outside, meanwhile, a huge army of spiders enveloped the entire house again to the head. Meanwhile, Kang Nam relaxed a little and said that it wasn't his fault that the house wouldn't let him out because he really couldn't help. He sighed with relief and said that most likely those creatures were going to live in his house, and what a pity that now he can't help them, Kang Nam said with a smile on his face. However, after that, he immediately hit his forehead against the wall with all his might and shouted that he hated this house. But for a moment, he thought that this was a great idea, after which he hit his head against the wall again. And pressing himself against the wall, he said that he wanted to ask his house for one thing. Meanwhile, outside, all the puppies had long since been defeated. And Kang Nam continued to think that everything looked rather strange because there was clearly no electricity here, but the vacuum cleaner was working. Also, the refrigerator was also in perfect order. It worked perfectly. It did not foretell trouble. And then the hero realized that it was not he who did all this, but the house. Meanwhile, the spider had already climbed onto the roof of the house and was trying to break it. Kang Nam heard the sounds of his paws and realized that the spider was not going to give up, after which he began to run around the room and think about what to do. After all, he does not want to die without doing anything. Suddenly, he plucked up determination and clenched his fist, admitting that this crazy world is real and all these creatures are also real and even this damned monster is also real. Therefore, if his house hears him, then he must definitely help. Kang Nam took more air into his lungs and shouted that the house should open the doors immediately. Immediately after this, the house began to glow with a blue glow. And after that, a strong shockwave appeared that threw the spider and all its spiders. The spider landed on his feet and looked at the house angrily. Suddenly, the front door opened and the hero's leg appeared. He was shirtless and charged with energy and complete confidence. After that, Kang Nam shouted that the bastard spider should get out of here as soon as possible, because otherwise, Kang Nam will show him the power of his home. Hearing this, the spider only became angrier and raising his belly prepared to attack. However, Kang Nam was able to evade the web. After that, he jumped up to the elf and broke the web in which she was. The puppies, together with their leader, began to bark loudly. Kang Nam, meanwhile, quickly grabbed the girl in his arms and went down with her to the safe place. Muri gained consciousness and was surprised to find that she had been saved by Mr. Man. After that, our heroes left her in a secluded place and again went out to fight the spider, which tried to attack the hero, but he surrounded himself with energy that protected him from every blow. The huge monster clearly did not despair and continued to strike blow after blow, but this did absolutely no harm to our hero. Kang Nam jumped onto the roof of his house in one motion, and he inserted himself into a fighting pose and said that now it was his turn to attack. After that, he began to cast fireballs towards this monster with incredible speed. The huge spider immediately covered all his children with his back. Kang Nam, meanwhile, throws fireballs at him and thinks that this is simply amazing and truly incredible, because he felt that he was filled with the power of his family. He felt it as if for the first time because he did not remember the fight with the wolf. However, now he has completely mastered this by force. After another couple of seconds, the spider, with an incredible scream, jumped onto the roof of the house and met your gaze with our hero. He tried to attack him with his paw, but Kang Nam grabbed his leg. After that, with one kick, he sent the spider back down. And then Kang Nam also jumped down, saying that this is not the end. The spider rose to its paws and Grodno looked at our hero, who was walking towards him and asking, "Does he really want to try again?" The spider's business was swollen, and he was clearly preparing for some strange attack. After that, he opened his mouth and poured acid all around. Poisonous fumes spread throughout the area, and the girl and the puppies said that this fog was poisonous, and therefore everyone needed to hold their breath. However, the hero didn't care and stood right in the center of this fog, as if he was immune to it. After that, he clapped his hands with all his might, and the fog around him disappeared. And between his hands there was a spider's paw, which he could not understand why this man was so strong. Everyone looked in surprise at how Kang Nam easily controlled this spider. Kang Nam, meanwhile, said with a smile that he was able to dispel this fog with the help of the wind, so now he can see everything perfectly. He continued to hold the spider by one hand, and with the other he began to collect energy from his body, and said that he would now put an end to this monster once and for all. Moo! with fear in her eyes, began to run towards the hero and ask him to stop. Nam looked at her in surprise and asked why he had to stop because it was the spider that attacked them first. And now that it was finally his turn to attack, he was not going to stand idly by. The girl looked down embarrassedly and replied that everything doesn't look exactly as he thinks, because they were the first to start it all. The girl said that she saw this just before she lost consciousness. Due to their fight with a huge werewolf, many little spiders lost their home. Hearing this, Nam immediately released the paw of the huge arthropod. After that, he looked at the huge streak left by his attack and confusedly asked, "Did he really do this?" The girl stood between the spider and the hero and said that it had happened. So now their nest was destroyed and everything that the mother spider collected for her cubs was burned. With these words, one of the spiders sat on her shoulder with tears in her eyes, and the huge monster also let out a couple of drops. The girl sadly said that these creatures do not cause harm without a reason. And besides this, not so long ago, a huge wolf appeared in this forest and stole all the food. Because of this, they were starving. Nam looked down with the thought that now he understands perfectly why they were so angry. Because of him, the house was destroyed. However, an unexpected huge spider waved its paw and tried to attack the girl from the puppies, but they were able to dodge. Moo and the puppy immediately hid behind the hero and said that the mother spider was still incredibly angry, so they needed to be careful with her. Nam took in more air into his lungs and looked into the eyes of a huge spider, after which he shouted that he was sorry for destroying their house. So he asked for forgiveness, because he understood how they felt. He also said that the spider could attack him as long as he was angry and subsides, but he cannot sit. The huge spider said something in spider language, and the elf immediately translated these words, saying that the spider was going to forgive the hero if he gave up these two. Mew fearfully said that along the way the spider was going to eat her, along with the puppy, and Nam, meanwhile, shouted with a smile that he agreed to these conditions. The elf immediately looked at him in surprise and asked why he was treating them like that. However, Nam did not pay attention to her and, looking into her eyes, asked will she really be satisfied with these two, because this is clearly not enough to satisfy the hunger of the entire swarm. So he asked the spider to wait a little and ordered the other puppies to bring meat from a huge werewolf. After some time, the puppies, with great difficulty, were able to convey everything they had and give the wolf meat, because the family of spiders could eat this for a month. Nam approached the spider and asked if this was enough. He also added that the meat was fresh and was obtained yesterday. The spider nodded to her children, and they immediately picked up all this meat and headed off to create a new nest. Our heroes watched the spider leave with her children and waved goodbye to her. Immediately after this, Nam fell because he was clearly tired and said that he was very glad that everything ended well. The elf and the puppy gave him a thumbs up and said that he was a real good guy. Meanwhile, on a nearby island, an unknown person felt the aura of a new person in this world. This guy's house looked like a castle with a tree growing out of it. The man looked very strange and looked more like a robot. However, instead of a head, he had an aquarium in which a mod floated with eyes through which he looked through a spyglass. Convinced that everything was as bad as he thought, he swore loudly and began to run away. He ran into the throne room and told the Demon King that the world tree had grown again. The Demon King, meanwhile, was playing with Lego and his beautiful throne. And the robot came closer to him and said that in any case, as he had ordered earlier, they sent spies. The robot also added that, as he warned, information has now appeared about the location of the world tree. With these words, the Demon King immediately destroyed the castle he was building. He seemed to look at his subordinate but remained silent. The next morning, Nam changed his clothes and climbed onto the roof of his house to see the consequences of his battles. However, unexpectedly, something fell on his head and then rolled down the roof. He immediately returned to the ground and decided to see what it was. Before his eyes was a piece of some very strange plant. He immediately pulled it out by the roots and said that he had to clean around his house every day. After that, he used one of his abilities with the thoughts that he should continue to practice his skills, and first he wants to master fire magic. He lit the fire table in his hands and began to walk slowly with it, but was surprised to notice that he would now come 10 meters after which the fire would go out. As soon as the light went out, the man immediately began trying to light it again. However, on his next attempt, he was able to walk only 10 meters before the fire went out, because if he moves away from the house at such a distance, then he cannot use magic. And it is precisely for this reason that in the forest nothing worked for him, without any gym. You would have simply blown your legs away from there before, they would have found themselves in such a terrible situation. With these thoughts, he fell to the ground and said that this was all somehow too cruel and difficult. because he just wanted a calm, quiet life, and now he cannot find a way to return home, and will become a real recluse in this world who is tied to his habitat. While he was thinking about this, he suddenly heard the voice of an elf who I was walking with, accompanied by a puppy. They asked in surprise why the heroes were lying on the ground. Had something really happened? And he looked at them and thought about what he should keep. His limitations and abilities are secret from these two, because if something happens, they will clearly be able to take advantage of this problem. After that, he looked at the sky again, and then reached into the back pocket of his pants and looked at the wallpaper of his phone with the thoughts that he misses his mother very much. Because despite the fact that all the technology works, the connection still continues to be unavailable in this world. However, while he was thinking about this, a bright glow in the sky that immediately attracted his attention and forced him to take his mind off the phone. Looking at it, he thought about what was falling from the sky. However, after a couple of seconds he received an answer and saw that it was a squirrel, which for some reason fell from a great height. The squirrel took aim at our hero, and the elf and the puppy immediately pounced on her, saying that she did not dare to attack Mr. Man. Kang Nam asked in surprise what else this was, and the elf held the squirrel by the tail and asked everyone to calm down. After this, the squirrel became even more angry and began to attack the girl, from which Elf covered herself with her own hands and asked not to do this. Kang Nam was already angry enough and grabbed her with his hands to order the squirrel to calm down, after which he angrily asked this rodent, "Where did she come from?" The little elf, whom the squirrel had patted quite well, stood with tears in her eyes and asked how Mr. Man was feeling, and if he was okay, to which Kang Nam replied that he was fine, but noticed that the girl's ear had now become a normal form. The girl looked at her right ear in surprise, and then she screamed in fear. She began to look down and ask herself where her ear had gone. After a couple of seconds, she finally found him on Earth. The girl immediately picked it up and, looking at the others, asked, "Did they really see everything?" And the puppy and Kang Nam stood in surprise and did not understand why she needed false elf ears. The girl began to say that in the place where she lives, all the elves have very long ears, so she was very complex. And she spent days and nights searching for a spell that could lengthen her ears. However, she did not succeed, and with her spells, she only caused harm to others. After one of these incidents, the library caught fire, and one of our heroine's teachers burst inside. The woman immediately asked what was wrong and did not immediately ask to open all the windows. After this, the woman approached the elf and asked what was happening here. The girl said that, in general, she was just conducting some kind of experiment. The woman simply looked at the unfortunate elf and said that they could no longer stand it, so she ordered her to immediately get out of this place. After that, the girl obediently walked out the door and was immediately faced with condemning glances because she again tried to lengthen her ears. Others said that there was nothing special about it. After all, everyone has long known that the ears of the princess of the Elven Kingdom look like human ones. Some said that perhaps the girl is even a human, or that her character is simply too similar to a human one and will throw up. They also discussed, what does this mean that the queen and her husband also fall under suspicion? One who was smarter immediately stopped his friends from these conversations because this could lead to punishment. The elf came across these words every day, and there were tears in her eyes every day. And this time, she also left here in tears, but one of the elves raised her false ears and laughed and said that she had forgotten something. The princess wanted to return with her false ears, but the rest of the elves began to laugh and say that even her ears were just a fake, and she was crying again like a real slob. They are doing something, looked at them and shouted loudly with tears in her eyes that she was not a fake and she was a real elf. They laughed again and said that she was just lying. After all, real elves cannot have such small ears. However, the girl had one friend who, now he was nearby, this is when he approached the spearman and took the mustache, saying that they themselves are not real elves, since they think that only ears are an indicator of belonging to their race. The offenders immediately left, thinking that it was better not to get involved and not get into conflict situations with this guy. When they were alone, the man tried to return the false ears of this princess, but she screamed loudly and pushed him down the stairs. After that, she slowly began to walk away, and all the other elves discussed that the girl was an incredible rude person. And the guy who had just been taken down the stairs only looked at her displeased. After that, the princess locked herself in one of the rooms, and her mother came up, who began to call her daughter and ask her to come out of there because she knows for sure that the girl is in this closet. After this, the king of the kingdom approached and asked his wife to calm down. But the woman said that they could not tolerate this anymore, because 50 years had passed. The man asked her, why such suddenness? While they continued to quarrel, the daughter suddenly came out and asked why they called her. Her mother immediately looked at the princess with displeasure and told her that she must remember that today is already the 50th year, and now she has no reason to refuse to travel, where these have already passed quite a long time since her older brothers and sisters hit the road. The princess listened, bowed her head and said that 50 years had already passed. The queen sighed heavily and added that her daughter was speaking correctly. The queen also said that she believed that during this time, her daughter could become a real elf. However, the queen said, taking a spectacular pose, there is no point in waiting for anything anymore, and the girl must hit the road. Tomorrow night, when the third moon intersects with the second, she will be obliged to leave this place. The king immediately looked at his wife and asked if she was too cruel to the children. And the princess, meanwhile, began to say that her mother was like a tyrant. The queen listened to all their words and added that no matter what they said, her decision will not change, and it is final. She also added that she is full of hopes that the girl will be able to learn something useful from this journey and become a real elf and also return safe and safety. The girl finished telling this story and sadly said that she had another 50 years left to eat, and as a result of her journey, she ended up here. Kang Nam listened to the whole story and said that it turned out that she was simply kicked out of the house, to which the princess immediately replied that they sent her on a trip and kicked her out. Kang Nam looked into her eyes and asked what would happen if she failed to find the world tree, to which the girl replied that it would not be difficult for her, and if Kang Nam did not help her, then she could easily cope alone. After that, Kang Nam got to his feet and said, "You're cool. What did she say about the world tree being able to make a wish come true?" He thought a little and asked how many wishes could be requested. The girl with a smile on her face said that the world tree is capable of making anything come true. Hearing this, Kang Nam said with a smile that in this case, he can allow the puppy and the princess to stay here for a while, but only until they find the world tree. The girl said that they would do so, and said that they had one topic left that they needed to discuss. She pointed to her ears and smiled shyly. Kang Nam immediately said that he understood everything and would keep her secret. He also looked at the main puppy and ordered him to keep his mouth shut, after which the puppy immediately barked several times with an approving intonation, and the princess immediately broke into a smile and thanked the master man because he treats her so well. While they continued to discuss all sorts of topics, one of the puppies ran up to them and began waving his hand and pointing in one direction. Kang Nam looked at him in surprise and asked what he was trying to tell them. The puppy began to run around the corner of the house and called the others with him. When they finally turned, he pointed at some person who was stuck in the ground. Kang Nam said that it was very strange that he ended up with his head in the ground. And as soon as the squirrel saw this man, he immediately broke out of his cage and headed towards him. As soon as she ran up, she immediately, with the help of her paws, began to rake the earth around this man in order to dig him up. Kang Nam walked up to this man with a slow step and asked the rodent to step aside. As soon as the squirrel moved away, Kang Nam took the man by the leg and abruptly pulled him out of the ground. As soon as the guy was free, he immediately turned around and tried to hit our hero. However, Kang Nam easily blocked this blow and was not even surprised. The boy stood on the ground and looked at the man in surprise. And Kang Nam looked into his eyes and asked him who he was. After this, the unknown person tried to attack the owner of the house again, but nothing worked, so he decided to step back a little to think about his actions in the future. Kang Nam looked at his hands and realized that while he was near the house, no magic affected him. However, he thought that even if this was the case, it was still very unpleasant that everyone he met was trying to attack him. He looked menacingly at this little child and said that he had just saved him from the ground, and instead of gratitude, this kid decided to attack him. The boy ignored these words and took out several kunai, immediately throwing them at our hero. However, Kang Nam easily defended himself from them without even making any effort. The guy looked in surprise at the man in the suit, thinking that he didn't understand why the attacks weren't taking him. Meanwhile, Kang Nam waved his hand and said that he wanted to forgive this guy, but now he understands that he is too biased, therefore there cannot be a fight here. The guy looked angrily at the hero, and opening his mouth asked who this man thought he was, and unexpectedly it turned out that he had a woman's voice, and most likely it was a girl. However, immediately after these words, the little girl immediately lost consciousness, and her squirrel rushed to her aid. The rodent began to whine loudly and try to lift its owner, but nothing worked. The princess immediately came up and asked if everything was okay. Kang Nam said that he did nothing, and she fell to the ground. The princess looked at everyone else and said that she couldn't feel this girl's heartbeat. Kang Nam immediately got scared and asked her to check again because this couldn't happen because he would give it. He didn't have time to lay a finger on this little girl. The princess turned the baby over and she swore loudly. The princess was immediately glad that the girl was breathing and alive. She and the hero asked her in surprise how this could be. After all, The princess had just said that her heart had stopped. The squirrel was spinning around the princess trying to explain something, but the princess did not understand what she needed to do. After that, Kang Nam walked up to this girl with a confident step and took her in his arms to take her to his house. The squirrel immediately began to attack the guy, and he briefly replied that he was going to help this girl so the squirrel could calm down. After that, they all went inside the house together, and Kang Nam went into his room and put the girl on his bed. They put a cold compress on her forehead, and the princess again tried to check the remote control but said that she had no heartbeat again. Kang Nam asked in surprise how this could be. The princess said that she didn't know how it worked, but immediately added that the girl was breathing well, and Kang Nam sighed with relief along with the puppy and the squirrel and said that this was an indicator that the girl must be alive. However, immediately after this, the princess immediately said that the heart stopped beating again, and our heroes screamed in horror. The hero and the squirrel had already begun to lose their nerves, and they loudly asked whether this girl was alive or not. And the princess said with a smile that she didn't even know how to explain it, because the girl was definitely breathing, but her heart could not be heard. Kang Nam folded his hands on his chest and said that there could be no place for common sense in this world. After that, he came closer to the girl and pointed his finger at her and asked if there was any way to revive her, like healing magic or something like that. The princess said that this could be done, but she still had not learned it yet. The squirrel continued to hiss loudly, and Kang Nam could not stand it and grabbed her, asking why she was constantly yelling, because she should be grateful to him for allowing them to stay in his mother's room. The princess looked at the hero in surprise and asked if he really has a mother. Kang Nam said that it is obvious that he has her, but now she is not here, so they need to go out and talk outside so that the girl is left alone with the squirrel. After these words, the squirrel immediately jumped onto the chest of its owner and began to wait for her to come to her senses. Little Ninja, meanwhile, I was dreaming about the past. In her dream, she stood on the edge of a mountain, and her sister suddenly approached her. The girl looked very beautiful and was holding a bouquet of yellow flowers in her hands. She gave this entire bouquet to her sister, and Ninja patted her on the head, thanking her for this. She also added that her sister makes her heart beat faster. However, a second later, this dream turned into a nightmare, and the ninja sister immediately changed in appearance and said that the girl's heart had not been beating for a long time. Immediately after this, in a dream, the girl looked down and saw that she had a hole in her chest. After that, she immediately woke up screaming, but looking back, she noticed that everything was fine with her, and her squirrel was sitting next to her. She stroked her pet's head, noticing that the blanket with which she was covered was very soft. After that, she immediately began to explore the room. And she came out of it, she saw that Kang Nam and the puppy and the princess were standing and getting ready for dinner. Everyone around said that the food smelled incredibly delicious. During dinner, the princess approached the hero and asked how such delicious food could be in these boxes, to which the guy replied that these were just semi-finished products. He immediately stopped explaining this because of the fire in his hand, saying that this was all thanks to his mystical divine power. The princess looked at the hero and asked what the name of this dish was, to which he replied that it was fried pork, and she replied that the name was quite difficult to pronounce, after which she continued to ask about the other dishes on this table, and Kang Nam explained everything to her. The girl tried something spicy and said that it was too spicy. However, you can eat it, but inside she was dying from the fact that everything inside her was burning. Kang Nam proudly said that this level of spiciness was normal for him, and the girl said that he was simply incredible. After that, she took a cup of espresso and asked what it was, to which the guy replied that it was regular coffee that he had prepared. The princess immediately poured it into the sink, and Kang Nam asked her in surprise how she dared to pour it out. The princess covered her mouth and said that it seemed to them that the coffee was spoiled, or perhaps the master had simply put poison in it to kill them. Kang Nam laughed and said that as he thought, suckers like them would not understand the delights of the taste of real coffee. Meanwhile, the squirrel was rummaging through one of the bags. The squirrel tried to do it unnoticed, however, Kang Nam noticed this and went down to her, said that she should not be shy and ride. He also added that her mistresses would prepare the food separately, and he asked not to misunderstand him, but his mother has an iron rule, in there is no room in the house. Thief. Therefore, if a squirrel wants to take something, it should simply say. Sitting on his haunches, he continued to explain that he did not consider them thieves, so the squirrel need not worry. Meanwhile, Ninja was already slowly approaching the guest room. Kang Nam got up and looked at the squirrel and asked what its owner was doing near his house. The puppy also began to ask the squirrel, but she didn't answer anything and just waved her head, and the princess translated her words like, "The squirrel explains that it's a secret and she won't tell it for anything." Kang Nam, tired of having to constantly listen to bad translations, asked the princess to be silent for a while. And then he looked at the squirrel and said that he even fed them, so why do they continue to make excuses? I was absolutely not allowed to go into the room and cleared my throat loudly and said that she was looking for the world tree. The princess looked at her in surprise and asked how the girl felt after she woke up. The ninja was in business with chips and said that the world tree appears once every 5,000 years and is capable of fulfilling any wish. Kang Nam immediately asked her to stop and said that everyone who is here is also looking for it. After these words, the ninja dropped the food from her hands and asked, "Do they really know the location of the tree?" Kang Nam immediately said that in fact they don't know, and he also needs to find this tree to return home, but I asked him what house he was talking about. After all, they are now in his place of residence, to which Kang Nam replied that he is not going to explain everything but briefly told my story. The ninja listened to all this and said that while searching for the world tree, she suddenly felt an ominous energy that came from one person. Kang Nam immediately asked who it came from, and she couldn't say that she wouldn't tell it, after which Kang Nam angrily asked why she had so many secrets. The girl said that it was none of his business and continued to tell the story that when she was flying, someone unexpectedly attacked her, and a huge fiery cloud of energy appeared and knocked her down. Kang Nam immediately realized that he had recently practiced magic, and the princess began to say that it was probably the master. Kang Nam immediately asked her to stop and not say anything, and said that it doesn't matter who hit her. After that, he coughed into his hand and said that he understood that the ninja was looking for the world tree, but added that he was very sorry. After all, they had no idea what it could look like or where to look for it. He also pointed his finger at the princess and added that even this elf, who has lived here for 200 years, knows nothing. The ninja listened to all this and said, "Some scroll told the owner of the house that this was gratitude for saving him." The princess immediately opened her scroll and asked, "Is this information about the world tree?" Kang Nam immediately approached her and asked what it is. He took the scroll from the princess and looked at it. However, his face immediately changed, and looking at the scroll, he asked with disappointment, "What is it?" However, after this, the scroll seemed to come to life, and the hero asked in surprise why the pictures on the map were moving because this was very unusual for his world. The ninja girl said that the map was made from the birch bark of the world's trees that appeared earlier, and everything is simple. Without a map, they show what state the sacred tree is in now. Looking at the canvas, the hero said that it looks like it is now blazing with fire. The princess immediately came up and said that this simply cannot be. After these words, the ninja pulled the card out of his hands and said that this is real nonsense because the world tree cannot burn. However, as soon as she opened the scroll, she was surprised to notice that this was simply impossible. Seeing that the tree was really burning, Kang Nam said that with the naked eye you can see that it is blazing, and there is no need to deny it. After that, the ninja immediately jumped out of the window at full speed. Breaking it, she and the hero asked her with a cry, "Does she really not know how to use doors? And why the hell does she always strive to destroy his house along with the others?" After that, he ran out into the street and saw that Ninja was standing on top of his roof. He continued screaming, "Is she really not going to come down, and how dare she climb onto someone else's house?" After that, the girl immediately jumped off and headed into the forest at full speed. Kang Nam looked at her in surprise and asked himself what was wrong with this girl and why she was so furiously looking for the world tree. However, he immediately realized that the answer is that it is capable of fulfilling any desire, so it's no wonder. In this fairy tale world, there is one tree that can fulfill any wish. However, if it dies, Kang Nam will not be able to return home. With this realization, Kang Nam was horrified and then looked at the princess and asked what would happen to his wish if the tree died. The princess replied that the master would not be able to return home because new ones would not appear very soon. The ninja, meanwhile, ran at full speed to the world tree and thought that she was sure that the sacred tree was very close, and if the fire really happened, then there should be traces somewhere. With these thoughts, she jumped up to see the entire forest. However, she could not find any sign of a fire, and her heart suddenly began to hurt. She took hold of him, but it was too late and she began to fall down. With a crash, she landed between the trees. The girl was in incredible pain and she felt like every day her strength was leaving her body. Meanwhile, Kang Nam was furious and did not understand what he should do. If the world tree disappeared, he looked at his roommates and asked how they could eat at such a moment. The princess immediately said that his food was incredibly delicious and she could not stop eating. And she also added that according to rumors, the world tree could grow again if its roots were not damaged. After this, the ninja immediately burst into our hero's house and he angrily asked why she destroyed his window again. Kang Nam immediately raised his fist to teach her a lesson, But the princess stopped him and asked him to calm down, and in the meantime the ninja took the ingot from his hands. She thought that this definitely couldn't happen. She and the hero looked at what she was doing and asked what she was doing. The princess began to explain to the hero that paper made from birch bark of the sacred tree is capable of storing memories, and thus you can see what was happening with the tree. Kang Nam immediately said that it was something like a video recorder, and the princess asked in surprise why he constantly throws unknown words. Meanwhile, the history of this tree appeared on the scroll. It was clear that it was very small, and several people approached it. The princess immediately said that the sprout is very small, and this is the first time she has seen the sacred tree in such a state. And Kang Nam thought that it seems that he has already seen this weed somewhere. Meanwhile, the ninja, clutching her heart, said that the sprout of the world tree was destroyed, and the scroll showed how Kang Nam was tearing it out of the ground. Everyone looked at this in horror, and the shinobi girl asked who could have done this. After that, they saw that the one who pulled out the sprout of the world tree was Kang Nam. They also saw that he begged him into the fire and ordered the puppies to burn this weed because it looked too disgusting. Kang Nam immediately looked out the window and saw that the puppies were burning the sprout. Seeing this, he realized that he was 100% guilty, and the scroll continued to burn before their eyes and to collapse. The others didn't even understand who did it, and the princess asked in surprise who could have committed such a disgusting act. The shinobi fell to her knees and said that such a thing was simply impossible. Kang Nam approached them and asked if there was any chance that this sprout might not be a sprout of the sacred tree, because they seem to say that the world tree is so cool because it created the world and it cannot be so easily destroyed. Yi did not answer anything and immediately rose to her feet, taking out a kunai. She asked who did this and said that she would immediately find and destroy this creature. The princess asked the girl to calm down and asked if the tree was really destroyed, to which the shinobi replied that she didn't even know how to feel about it. However, she had to find out who did it in order to take revenge. Even the puppy took out his blade and began to say that he would definitely kill the one who did it. After this shinobi, I went to my room and said that she actually came here to destroy the sacred tree. The others looked at her in surprise and asked, "What is she talking about?" Kang Nam immediately approached her and took her by the clothes, saying that she was the culprit and he was able to catch the culprit. Meanwhile, the girl sadly replied that she simply had such an order. Kang Nam asked her in surprise what she was talking about, and the girl replied that she was ordered to destroy the world tree. But this is already up to someone for her. After that, he began to ask how something that cannot be destroyed died. And is it really a tree? Is it something like a phoenix? And the girl said that the Rostov of the world tree is especially vulnerable in the first week and is no different from ordinary trees, and at this time it stocks up forces to become sacred. And the order that she was given was to destroy this very sprout and thereby take away the chance from all creatures. Kang Nam looked at his companions and said that he was, and the criminal was a shinobi. The princess looked at the girl in surprise and asked what she meant by taking away everyone's chance. The shinobi pressed herself close to the squirrel and said that it was all because of the one who gave her the order, because this man wants no one to have a chance to destroy him by making a wish at the sacred tree. The princess looked at the shinobi and asked who was her master. The shinobi did not answer anything and looked at our hero and said that she would ask only one thing. After that, she paused a little dramatically and asked, "What exactly connects Kang Nam and the one who gave her the order?" He looked at her in surprise and asked what she was talking about. However, unexpectedly their conversation ended because someone knocked on the door. Kang Nam looked at the front door and asked who was there. The shinobi immediately disappeared just in case, and Kang Nam slowly walked up to the door and opened it to look at who came to him. These were gnomes. The oldest of them stood near the door and greeted the hero, saying that he was the guardian of the tree. Kang Nam looked at them in surprise and asked what they were talking about, and the dwarf asked for a glass of water with a smile before the story began. Kang Nam froze in place and said that he first wants to know who is standing in front of him. The elder dwarf looked at the owner of the house and asked, "Isn't he the guardian of the tree?" The gnomes also began to say that the last time he was 1,000 years ago, and probably this man is simply a descendant of the guardian of the tree. After this, the dwarf began to examine our hero and asked, "Is he really a man?" The rest of the gnomes immediately grabbed their heads because for the first time in their lives, they saw a real person here. They immediately approached our hero and began to touch him, saying that they did not understand how a person could end up in a sacred place, because according to rumors, they are lazy creatures. The elder immediately looked at his brothers and ordered them to calm down, after which he asked if they had forgotten where they were. The dwarves immediately apologized and said that they were ashamed. After that, they began to argue and blame each other. In search of who started it first, One of the dwarves said that his friend called this person a lazy creature, and the second dwarf said that until the first one provides a recording of the conversation, he has no right to accuse someone, and the first one said that next time he would definitely record their conversation twice. The princess left the house to see what the noise was and saw her grandfather. She also pounced and began to hug him. Gangnam asked how they knew each other, and the princess said that she was sorry because she didn't introduce herself properly. After that, she put her hand on her chest and bowed, saying that she was the third child of the Queen of the Green Forest and was greeting the Lord King of the Gnomes. Gangnam immediately began to examine the Gnome King, and the Gnome King greeted the girl and said that she had grown a lot over the years, and the princess replied that he had not changed a bit. Meanwhile, the gnomes took out a hammer and began knocking on the house. Having gathered together, they began to discuss that this was the first time they had seen such a construction, and the choice of material was simply terrible. The gnome with a hammer in his hands said that he had never seen such houses before, and the others smiled and added that he was quite fragile. Gangnam looked at all this and asked why they were destroying his house. The princess immediately took our hero by the hand and said that these gnomes are the kings of various states and he should be polite to them. Gangnam immediately asked, "Why does it matter to him who it is? It doesn't give them the right to brazenly destroy other people's property like that houses." The king and the new ones apologized for his relatives and said that these guys are a little great. And Gangnam, meanwhile, thought that this was the second time that his house suffered because of someone else's curiosity. After this, the dwarf king adjusted his glasses and asked us his hero, "Is he really not the keeper of the tree?" Gangnam put his hand on his heart and introduced himself by his name, saying that he is the owner of this house. However, he is not the keeper of the tree. The dwarf king snapped her fingers and said that in this case, she apologizes for the trouble and asked to treat them to a glass of water. Gangnam thought about it and said that he could do that. The princess looked at the edges of the dwarves and asked how the elf queen was doing there. Corvi said that he had already heard everything and asked if the girl had really been kicked out. The princess immediately began to deny it and say that it was not so. After all, she just went on a trip. After that, the dwarf king laughed and asked if she had achieved what she wanted, and I immediately bowed my head and said that the situation did not allow it yet. After this, the dwarf king spread his arms and added that the elven queen will definitely arrive because the sacred tree appears only once in 50 centuries, and not only the elven queen will be at this event, but also all the other creatures of this world. The princess began to feel embarrassed, and the gnome king laughed, saying that he saw that she felt uncomfortable because the relationship between children and parents has always been difficult for all races. After that, the king of the gnomes approached the girl and whispered in her ear that, in secret, his mother kicked out the same thing when he was 500 years old. Damn! Now I looked at him and asked, "Is this true?" The king of the gnomes immediately nodded silently. The silence ended because the voice of some knights was heard, who said that they would now begin their formation. Gangnam looked at who came and saw that it was the elf queen and the king. The woman immediately got off her horse and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. After that, she approached and bowed to the king of the gnomes. He also bowed back and said that he was very glad to meet. As soon as the elf king saw his daughter, he immediately approached her and hugged her, asking how she was doing. The queen looked at this and ordered them to be more reserved, and the man immediately moved away. After that, the elf queen looked at her daughter and added that they had not seen each other for a long time. The princess looked at her mother and said that it was so, and Gangnam, meanwhile, looked at all this and did not understand how he ended up among the elves. The queen looked at her daughter again and sighed heavily and said that they should talk in private. However, suddenly the king looked up in the new one and said that someone else had arrived. Gangnam looked up and saw some huge birds approaching his house at great speed. After that, he heard some noise from below and looked down and saw that some lizards were crawling out of the ground. And also some other knights appeared. Gangnam looked at all this in surprise and saw that the king of people appeared, who said that he was the last to arrive and apologizes for this. The bird king and the lizard king looked at the other kings and said that since everyone had gathered, they could begin. The dwarf king was delighted that the former general of the lizards now deserved to become king. After which the dwarf king looked at the human king and could not remember his name. The king of people spread his arms and said that it was normal that he didn't remember him. After all, when they met he was 5 years old and ordinary people unfortunately don't live that long. After this the men laughed and Gangnam looked in surprise at the club of kings. He got tired of waiting and went up to them and asked if anyone could explain to him what was happening here. The dwarf king immediately replied that it should be clear that they were all gathered here to see the sacred tree that appears once every 50 centuries. The elf queen looked at the group of people and said that they had suffered quite a lot. Then she added that the elves would help them heal their wounds. The king of people took hold of his beard and said that on the way here they met a lot more monsters than usual, and this had never happened before, so they were not prepared. The lizard said that this journey was difficult for people. However, as always, they managed. The king of men smiled and asked him to stop embarrassing him. The elf queen, meanwhile, looked into the distance and said that she had a premonition, and she also said that she came here when she was younger. However, everything here has changed a lot and she does not feel the power of the sacred tree. The Lizard King immediately said that now the tree is at the stage of strengthening, and this should be obvious, and monsters are a common thing here. The Dwarf King wanted to say something, but suddenly his assistant came up to him and whispered something in his ear. After that, the king in a new way looked to the side. And our blood also looked somehow at where he was looking, and was surprised to find that an incredibly large number of creatures had gathered here. They all stood peacefully near our hero's house and waited for the sacred tree to appear. Gangnam immediately looked at the Gnome King and asked, "Did all these creatures come here to look at the sprout of the sacred tree?" The Gnome King said that this is one of the best events in this world, and all the creatures that once distributed there are now arriving in peaceful harmony just to see this miracle. Gangnam looked at this entire huge crowd with the thought that now he will come to an end if they find out that he destroyed the world tree. In the evening, even more people gathered here, and today they drank to the dregs because they had a holiday. The creatures drank with a smile because luck was on their side today. Someone said that they should thank fate for the fact that their generation will be able to attend this incredible event. Meanwhile, Gangnam was sitting at home and was nervous because he had destroyed the tree sprout. He walked back and forth around the room and thought what he should do now. And if everyone finds out that the sacred tree died through his fault, then there will be nothing left of it. And all these creatures will simply kill him mercilessly. Gangnam concentrated his energy in one of them, and thought about his powder here, like he did with that werewolf. After these thoughts, he grabbed the wall and decided that this definitely couldn't be allowed, because he couldn't give up so easily. Pressed against the wall, he turned to his house and asked if he could use his power to do something, but the house did not answer him. Suddenly a princess appeared and asked her master what he was doing. He immediately got scared and said that he was not doing anything like that. The girl looked down and said that the food was too tasty not to share with everyone, so she decided to give it away. The hero, meanwhile, looked at all this and said that he hid this food in the house so that there would always be food in reserve. The princess said with a smile that the puppy found the boxes in the pantry next to the kitchen. Hearing this, Gangnam immediately became angry, and his fist even caught fire. The princess looked at all this and asked him to calm down. After that, she threw all this food into his hands and asked him to take it to the others. And she also immediately said that she thanked him for his help without receiving an answer. After that, she hummed a melody under her breath and went to distribute food. And in the meantime, Gangnam said that this should not be done. He grabbed his head, in the sense that he had so many thoughts now about how he wanted to remain a survivor. He looked at the food again and was surprised that there were so many semi-finished products in his house. He also thought that it had been a long time since I saw a girl with a squirrel. While he was thinking about this, someone came down from the roof of the house and stole several bags of food through the window, and Gangnam kept thinking that he could put all the blame on the girl and her squirrel by saying that they were the ones who destroyed everything. Shinobi, meanwhile, sat on the roof and ate food with the thought that she did not know who to report to her boss, and Gangnam continued to think that he should watch what was happening. A way to solve the problem would certainly appear. Meanwhile, the kings sat at the table and waited for the princess to bring them semi-finished products. Gangnam and the puppy also got a job as waiters and served food to everyone who wanted it. The king of the gnomes immediately began to eat and said that this was a very unusual food. And the lizard added that he never considered human food to be anything special. However, as soon as he took a bite, he immediately broke into a smile and said that it was the most delicious thing he had eaten in his life. The king of people also took the utensils, and his servant said that Highness should know that something could be mixed into the food, so he shouldn't be so careless about his safety. The second servant immediately ordered the first to be silent, and I'm braiding it in this place for sure nothing bad will happen. Even the elf queen enjoyed her food, but she did it like everything else with great elegance and grace. After that, she said that since no one was hurt, everyone can start eating and not worry about anything. The king of people immediately thanked the woman. Meanwhile, the king of the elves stood next to the princess and said that he was very glad that this chick managed to ask him for such a thing in such a short time. Well, suddenly the atmosphere became tense because huge wolves appeared in the distance. They silently walked past our hero and didn't even pay attention to him. Gangnam immediately prepared for battle, and the puppy began to cower from fear. Meanwhile, the Wolf King, with a slow step, walked up to the other kings. He put his hand on his chest and said that he had received information that one of his relatives had committed a crime here. So he wants to offer his deepest apologies on behalf of the clan representative. All the other kings also placed their hands on their chests and said that their good faith should be filled with the blessings of the sacred tree. After that, they separated, and the king of people said that he was thinking about the fact that these guys probably know that the sacred tree is now very much in its smoke, and maybe they didn't come here for selfish reasons. The king of the lizards immediately added that he was sure that the wolf is a servant of the devil. He also added that he spoke about this at the last meeting, and in his thoughts, the devil would definitely want to take advantage of the current situation. The king of the gnomes approached the king of the wolves and said that, of course, he was also to blame for what had happened. After all, when one of his clan commits crimes, he upsets the entire balance. The lord of the werewolves said that he is now searching for the pest in order to punish him to the fullest extent. Kangnam looked at the werewolf lord and said that it was he who destroyed the wolf. And Kangnam also added that he thinks that he is the one to whom they should apologize. The Lord of Wolves looked at our hero and asked if he really destroyed him. And the lizard laughed and said that he understood everything, but a person alone would not be able to defeat such a wolf. After that, Kangnam immediately took out the werewolf's eyeball and showed it to everyone present here. Each king immediately stopped laughing or talking and just looked at our hero in surprise. Meanwhile, Kangnam began to explain that this wolf suddenly attacked these puppies and decided to take over their homes by seizing the local lands. The elf queen looked at the dogs and said that she also agreed that an apology should be made to the puppies. The Lord of Werewolves immediately fell to his knee and offered his deepest apologies. He also said that he would understand if they could not forgive him, but added that he wanted to ask permission for them to start rebuilding their village as an apology. Kangnam looked at the puppies and said that he did not even expect that such a stern werewolf king would be so kind inside. He also added that he thought that this would completely compensate for the damage caused to him. The puppy barked loudly and pointed his fist in the air. The princess immediately translated his words and said that this puppy said that they forgive werewolves. However, they refuse their help. After all, they can restore their village on their own. However, immediately after this, an axe flew past our hero's ear and crashed into his house. Kangnam looked at this axe in surprise and asked what it was, and the princess added that perhaps a fight had broken out somewhere. And indeed, one of the orcs loudly shouted to his enemy that he would cut off his head and make a stuffed animal out of it. And the second creature said that everything would be exactly the opposite, and the orc would die today. They continued to fight, and people stood around them and admired them. Suddenly, the orc grabbed the thug and threw him over himself. The kings looked at all this disgrace and thought that these guys were clearly not going to stop, so they needed to be dealt with. But then Kangnam appeared and knocked out the ogre with one click. After that, he asked, "Is his house some kind of joke for them?" However, he immediately fell to the ground and grabbed his leg, saying that it was quite painful, after which the princess ran up to the master man and asked if he was okay. She started massaging his sore leg and asking if he was feeling better, to which Kangnam replied that he was not fine and it hurt a lot. The Lizard King looked at this and said that this man had just knocked out a huge monster that weighed more than 500 kilo, and the Human King was surprised and asked, "Is this really possible?" He looked at his servants and asked if they knew this man because he didn't think that this boy was one of them. The rumors immediately answered that they were also seeing this guy for the first time. Blood of Dwarves looked at all this and said that now he can confidently assure that this is a very unusual person. Looking at this, the werewolf turned around and, together with his group of werewolves, headed back into the forest. And Kangnam looked at the kings and said that he absolutely doesn't care who stands in front of him. And he began to scold them for starting a bacchanalia in the middle of the night next to someone else's house, and came here from nowhere, eating his food and still managing to encroach on his house. The Lizard King waved his hand and asked how this ill-mannered brat dares to talk to kings like that. Kangnam immediately took a fighting stance, and the princess said that she understands that he is angry, but he shouldn't talk to kings like that. Kangnam wanted to answer something, but suddenly he heard the roar of the earth, and looking back, he saw that several huge ogres were running towards him at breakneck speed and saying that now they would take revenge for their brother. And this man does not deserve forgiveness. But after a couple of minutes, Kangnam stood over the mountain of defeated monsters and said that he would not allow anyone to approach his house. His screams spread throughout the entire area with a bluish glow. And the robot who was watching this from the Tower of Demons even broke his telescope in surprise. Even the Demon King, who was peacefully playing with toys, noticed this scream, and the house he built collapsed. The kings looked at Kangnam in surprise, and the puppy showed thumbs up and clearly approved of his owner's mood. The princess tried to calm the man down, but Kang Nam just scolded loudly and headed inside his house. However, behind him, the dwarf king appeared and asked the man to stop for a second. Kang Nam asked what he needed, and the king of the gnomes said with a smile that he wanted a little more portion of this dish. Kang Nam got incredibly angry and went into his house, slammed the door loudly. The king of the gnomes sadly said that he really wanted to see his grandmother, but apparently it was not fate. King, yesterday I looked at all this and said that it was possible that he killed. The wolf was not an accident. After that I thought a little, and definitely added that it was not an accident. After that, he approached the defeated monsters and kicked them with the words that they would simply remain scum, even if the whole world changed. So one should not expect much from them. The elf queen looked at the lizard and said that the general was still speaking in him, and that he needed to maintain his dignity as future kings, but I answered the devil that he always said that all races that were somehow connected with the devil had to be wiped off the face of the earth. After that, he turned around and began to leave, and the blood of the gnomes asked him not to forget to come tomorrow before dawn. After that, the king of people said that it was time for him to go, and in short, he approached him and quietly asked if he had already found what he was asked for. So the role of the people answered that he had not found it yet, because it is not easy, and considering that from the information they only know the age of the boy, this complicates the situation even more. After that, the human king began to leave and said that he was very surprised that the new king of the demonic race was a person who was less than 10 years old. The elf queen bowed her head and said that it was necessary to talk about such things in a specially designated place in front of everyone. And she also added that it had just been a long time, so she would like to talk to the princess. The princess looked at her mother in surprise and asked, "Is this true?" Meanwhile, Kang Nam was lying on his bed and could not sleep from dissatisfaction. After that, he jumped up sharply, and holding his head, he could not understand what he should do, because in his opinion, as soon as the sun rose, and he would be burned at the stake because they would find out that he had destroyed the tree sprout. However, when he looked up, he saw that he was not alone in the room. He looked at the huge werewolf with fear, and meanwhile the werewolf stood up and said that he had been waiting for a very long time for the boy to wake up. The werewolf king came closer to our hero and said that according to rumors, the wolf whom Kang Nam destroyed committed many atrocities on the orders of the demon king. However, he was still part of his family. Kang Nam looked into the eyes of the huge wolf and asked what difference it made if he was a villain. The wolf said that he apologized in advance for his rudeness. He also added that there was nothing personal in this and, raising his fist, directed it towards our hero. Kang Nam immediately jumped up from his bed and dodged this blow, after which he asked, "What the hell is this wolf doing?" After all, he has already apologized for his relative, and it's just hypocrisy to attack like that. However, after this, Kang Nam thought about the fact that the wolf even waited until the owner woke up so that his murder would not be vile. However, Kang Nam said that in any case, if he suddenly decided to take revenge, then he must prepare for the consequences. After that, Kang Nam surrounded himself with the energy of his home and said that he would now kill another werewolf if the Wolf King was not going to retreat. But after that, Kang Nam immediately calmed down and said that even though they were going to fight, in any case they needed to change the place of the battle because he was not going to spoil his home. The Wolf King briefly replied that he agreed with this, and Kang Nam thought that surprisingly this guy agreed easily. Meanwhile, the queen, along with the dwarf and the princess, headed to a small deserted area where the queen immediately used her magic and created a huge tree. After that, she entered the root and asked others to also enter inside. The princess and the dwarf king were immediately inside, and the dwarf king said that the queen was an incredibly talented checkmate, and the princess thought that she would not expect anything less from her mother. There were elves walking around patrolling the area. After that, they sat down at the table, and the elf queen asked, "Was the scroll that had just burned really made from the birch bark of the sacred tree?" After that, she took out her scroll and said that something terrible happened to her whistle too. The princess looked at the second scroll and said that they looked identical, and the elf king looked at his daughter and thought that she had grown up to be a beauty. The dwarf king looked at the scrolls and said that the world tree suddenly disappeared on the map, and he wondered why this happened. The princess immediately stood up and said that in the ancient books, she believed that the world tree could never disappear, and in any case, it would take root again. The elf queen asked, "Did they really see someone uproot the sprout?" The elf queen immediately began to say that over the last 1,000 years, there have been many large and small battles, and the balance of the world was maintained by two sacred trees, and they balanced the forces in the east and in the west. The dwarf king continued the story and said that with the murder of the demon, the world tree in the east was destroyed and now only remained in the west. The princess listened to all this and asked what they should do now in this case. The dwarf king added in a quiet voice that if the last sacred tree was destroyed, then great chaos would ensue, and the age would come to an end. The elf king thought a little and said that if the second tree also disappeared, wouldn't this mean that the forces would begin to balance in this world? Everyone looked at him in surprise, and the king immediately said that this was just a common joke. The dwarf king laughed and said that the elf king was incredibly funny, and he also added that he did not understand why their ancestors hated each other so much. The elf queen asked them to be silent and said that in any case the sacred tree should appear at dawn, because that's when they will find out about everything. Also, the elf queen looked at her princess and asked if the girl had found what she was looking for. The princess did not have time to answer anything, because one of the servants came inside and apologized for interrupting their conversation, and said that they had to take a look at something important. Meanwhile, Kang Nam and the werewolf king continued to go into the forest, and suddenly the hero stopped the king and said that they could not move too far away. The reverse king said that there was a lot of space around, and the hero did not want them to touch his house. Kang Nam immediately thought that everything was really like that, but he can only use power while within a radius of 10 meters from the house, so he can't move the battle too far. The hero looked at the huge werewolf and asked why he came here because Kang Nam does not think that he has a strong desire for revenge. Kang Nam immediately took a small stick and said that they would fight inside the circle. He ran around and drew it with this stick. After that, he added to Katya that it was not necessary to kill each other, and added that they would only have 2 rounds. And if he wanted to give up, he could simply leave the circle. The werewolf king said that this was something new, but asked whether such an area would be enough. Kang Nam immediately smiled, thinking that this guy does not suspect anything, that the main character will not be able to drink from this circle because here he has divine by force. However, in fact, he said that his relative had much less space, and immediately asked, is he just not confident in himself? The werewolf king calmly replied that pride is a direct path to the destruction of one's personality. He also added that he was already starting the fight, and at that very second he found himself behind our hero, raising his hand to finish him off. However, Kang Nam easily returned from this blow. After that, he looked at the werewolf king and asked, will it be enough for him to just stand still? The werewolf king once again swung his hand and tried to hit our hero, but he was again able to easily dodge. This continued for several more minutes, but Kang Nam easily dodged each blow. After one of them, he drove all over the earth and said that the werewolf king was somehow too slow. After that, the werewolf king stopped and said that in this case he can start fighting at full strength. With these words, he took up his eye patch. And as soon as he took it off, Kang Nam saw that one of his eyes was red and the other was blue. The aura immediately changed and the werewolf king said that he would now become more serious. This battle spread throughout the area, causing the creatures that were sleeping not far from the awakening site of the divine tree to wake up. One of them looked into the distance in surprise and asked, is it really that the sacred tree appeared so early? But the goblin who stood next to it said how long a fight had broken out there. The creatures began to approach to see what was happening, and recognized one of the fighters as the man who was the owner of the house. They looked in surprise at how the weak man confronted the leader of the wolf clan, and did not understand why this fight happened at all. But they made a reservation that the man was quite brave once in entering such an unequal battle. Almost all the creatures said that the leader of the wolves must show this selfish man who is in charge here. The princess learned about this battle and went as fast as she could to see it in order to save her master. The dwarf king said that this was quite an interesting sight because he was always interested in learning about human strength. However, the princess heard these words and said that they were obliged to stop this fight. The king and the new ones asked her not to worry so much because he was sure that the werewolf would not harm the boy. Meanwhile, the man also decided to use all his strength to fight this wolf. He still continued to evade blows. Namely, he carried not a single oncoming one. Having returned from one of the blows, the main character realized that after this wolf took off the blindfold, he became much faster. And the head of the wolf clan, meanwhile, looked at our hero and thought that in front of him was clearly an unusual person because he couldn't believe that he managed to avoid the wolf's attack. However, this guy is rather clumsy in the opinion of the head of the wolf and looks as if it's his first time uses his power. The head of the wolves looked at our hero and said that he did not understand how badly he could defeat his relative, but added that he would now correct and restore the reputation of his race. After that, he delivered another blow, which Kang Nam was also able to dodge. Kang Nam used her fist and said that no matter how many times this wolf tried to attack him, he still wouldn't succeed. However, unexpectedly, he noticed that he had tripped and was shooting at the gas on the uneven ground. Immediately after this, the head of the wolf clan took the chance and struck. Kang Nam looked down and found that everything was now covered with claw wounds. He immediately took off his sweatshirt when he said that the wounds were burning very badly, and he thought that the end would just come to him. The princess looked at our hero in an excited voice and asked if he was okay. Hearing this voice, the guy looked around and saw behind the cat that a lot of people were watching this battle. They all said that they thought that people were very weak, but he proved that he was strong enough, so they like him, and that's why they asked her to continue fighting to hit this wolf. He was surprised and listened and looked at all this, not understanding where they all came from. However, without receiving the answer, he immediately took a fighting stance with the words that in this case he cannot use the fireworks skills, and he thinks that he will be able to defeat this head of the wolves with physical strength alone. Meanwhile, the head of the wolf clan looked at his palm and thought that he remembers exactly how he struck the man, but there is not a single wound on his body. He looked at our hero and said that the last blow was delivered with great speed, and his opponents never called after that. Kang Nam looked at his eyes and asked, "Was this not the maximum speed and he can move even faster?" The head of the wolves chuckled and said that naturally he can move faster, and also added that now his speed will be increased by another third. Immediately after this, he assumed his true form and used his wolf essence. The princess watching this said that this was somehow too much, and the king of the gnomes was just surprised and said that now the battle would be even more interesting. Immediately after this, the wolf began to circle around the hero at great speed. Meanwhile, Kang Nam looked around and did not understand how he should monitor this speed. He didn't know where to expect the blow, so he simply raised his hands and took a defensive stance. Immediately after that, the wolf attacked him in an open place, and Kang Nam realized that his opponent was incredibly strong. Kang Nam thought that last time he could barely cope with the spider, and this wolf is not even close to him in strength. After these thoughts, the wolf suddenly uttered a phrase, saying that it was time for them to end this stupid battle, because the winner is already obvious. They angered the main character, so he used all his power and decided that he had no choice because victory would have to use fireworks. Raising his right hand up, he began to pray that his power would not hurt anyone except the wolf. After that, he used his most important ability to its full potential. Having looked, I immediately realized that it was me, and he needed to avoid it at all costs. But he noticed that she was too fast, and he definitely wouldn't be able to dodge. Everyone looked in surprise at how Kang Nam used his trump card and could not believe that he was so strong. The wolf returned to his human-like form and raised his hands, trying to hold back this blow. Meanwhile, Kang Nam was glad that he only hit the Uncle Wolf and did not hurt the rest of the audience. Meanwhile, he thought that the strength of a person is simply incredible, and he cannot believe that an ordinary person is capable of this. But he still thought that the energy he was emitting was definitely not stable. Kang Nam shouted if the wolf was giving up because he was worried about him because he looked weakened. The head of the wolf clan was offended after such a comparison and said that if he had to surrender so soon, he would not have offered this fight. Kang Nam continued to radiate his energy and said that the wolf was too stubborn and suggested that he give up. However, the wolf was proud and said that he would never go into battle against someone who was weaker than him. Kang Nam looked at all this and decided that the situation could become really dangerous, so he thinks that he needs to stop. However, after thinking about it, he realized that he didn't even know how to do this. The princess heard these words and asked, "Does Kang Nam really not know how to stop this attack?" The elf queen looked at this and said that if this continues, something unexpected might happen. Kang Nam tried to stop, but he noticed that for some reason the power of his skill began to increase on its own. And now even he was scared, and this was incredibly powerful. The Lizard King covered the Dwarf King with his hand and said that the situation remains too unstable because this ill-mannered person is creating trouble. So he thinks that it is better for them to move away. The king, but in the meantime, asked this yesterday if he had accidentally seen the king of people, to which the lizard replied that they had evacuated all the creatures of the weak race, so the window need not worry. Meanwhile, even the kings were feeling uncomfortable and cowering from this attack, and the shinobi held on to the edge of the house and dreamed of not flying away from here to hell, simultaneously holding her squirrel by the tail. The head of the wolf clan still had the strength to hold back this incredible attack, but every second he became weaker. At some point, he realized that he could no longer hold back this incredible attack, and his arms completely weakened, which resulted in a direct hit. The wolf, struck by this attack, fell on his back and said that this guy's strength is simple, and he admits that he lost. Meanwhile, Kang Nam said that this is not important at all now because his power has stopped obeying him. The wolf immediately stood up after these words and ordered the man to stand still, otherwise he might hurt the others. And Kang Nam said that no matter how hard he tries to control this power, it still doesn't obey him and everything is useless. After that, Kang Nam turned to his house and asked him for help, saying that this is his strength so he must do something. However, there was no answer. But Kang Nam did not lose heart and said that he very much hopes for his home and that it will help in this situation. The hero's hands could not withstand such a load and accidentally went up. After which he released his skill, which rose into the sky and spun like crazy. He couldn't believe his eyes, and after taking a mouthful of air, he shouted for everyone to run away urgently. Meanwhile, his skill had finally reached its goal. He landed on the ground and there was an incredible explosion. Everyone who stood nearby was blown away by the wind beyond fifth, and even Kang Nam, standing near his house, could not stand on his feet. Looking down, he thought that this simply could not happen. After a couple of seconds, everyone looked at the place of the battle. Unrest began in the crowd, and questions began. Is it really all over? Someone also said that she thought that today they would all die after this attack. When everyone came to their senses, the Lizard King looked around and asked if anyone was hurt, to which he was told that everything was fine. The princess escaped from her father's arms and rushed to the epicenter of the explosion, saying that they must find the master man. However, the head of the wolves noticed that the girl began to run here and shouted that no one should come here because the action of the force had not ended yet. He still continued to hold back this huge ball of power and said that he would not allow anyone to interfere with the battle. The princess wanted to say something, but her mother immediately came up and said that they should just stand and watch. The Lizard King asked if the shockwave had not yet disappeared, and immediately cursed because he could not see anything because of the fog. The Raven King flew from the sky and said that 8 wolves and 2 were holding back the wave. The Dwarf King thought for a bit and said that if this cloud of power explodes, they could all die. The Lizard King immediately said that this was simply impossible because an ordinary person was not capable of such a thing. The Raven King said that they all need to be careful, and also added that this man's strength is quite strange. Meanwhile, the head of the regiments was barely holding back this huge shockwave. His eyes were blinded by a bright flash, and he did not understand how an ordinary person could do such a thing. And he also did not understand how he could correct his mistake. The leader of the wolves shouted loudly that he was running out of strength, and if this continues, the others may suffer. Kang Nam looked in surprise at how this wolf leader held back his blow so as not to injure the others. Meanwhile, the Wolf King continued to say that he did not understand how an ordinary boy could create such incredible power. His legs began to give way, but he convinced himself that he should hold out for a little longer. The shockwave should gradually subside. Everyone who came to see the awakening of the divine separation braids was now standing behind the leader of the wolves behind the cat and did not understand what to do. They definitely would not have time to escape. Someone even noticed that this blow is getting bigger, and very soon it will explode, killing everyone who is here. The king and the new one looked at this and calmly said that Volkov would not last too long in the office, so they definitely had to come up with something. The Lizard King looked at the creatures and ordered everyone to duck. They immediately listened to him, and everyone, including the kings, hid behind their shields and bent down as low as possible. And it was perfect timing because the Wolf King could no longer hold back this shockwave and fell to the ground. Immediately after this, a huge cloud of energy exploded. All the creatures that had gathered here pressed their hands to their heads and prayed for them to come out. Even kings and their sons and daughters did this because they did not think that they would be able to survive this explosion. But suddenly Kang Nam noticed that there was complete silence around, and no explosion happened. He looked at the remnants of energy that Vitali had in the air and could not utter a word. For strange reasons, this skill failed to work. The leader of the wolves took his bandage to put it on his eye, and people in the crowd were discussing that it seemed that everything was over and they had not died. They began to idolize the leader of the wolves for coping with this task. However, the Volkov army itself was holding his bandage in his hand, and looking at our hero, he said that his hands were shaking so much that he couldn't even put it on. After that, he approached our hero and said that he was outside the circle. Kang Nam looked down in surprise and said that this was probably true. The leader of the wolves was silent for a while and said that this battle was coming out. He won. Kang Nam did not answer, and the head of the wolves began to leave. Suddenly, Kang Nam came to his senses and raised her hand and asked him to stop for a second. The wolf stopped, and Kang Nam, looking down, thanked him. The leader of the wolves said that such power was not intended for him, and it was too early for him to possess it. He also added that he doesn't understand how Kang Nam was able to get it. However, he hopes that such situations will not happen again. Immediately after this, the wolf turned around again and began to leave, so Kang Nam remained in confusion. But in the meantime, the princess and the puppy began to approach him, who were glad that he remained in the stomach and could not harm others. The elf queen, looking at this, said that she thought so, and the king, but he said that he too was not in vain worried. After that, the elf queen looked around and added that she had not seen the divine tree here. The lizard king looked at her in surprise and asked what she was talking about, and how could it be that it did not bloom. Meanwhile, the princess pushed the creatures aside and told them to step aside because they needed to pass. And the rest of the crowd said that this man had just almost killed them, and if it weren't for the leader of the wolves, it's not clear how it would have ended. All creatures began to call him the curse of this world and ordered him to get out of these lands and not even think of approaching the perfect. Under this scream, Kang Nam went inside, and the princess and the puppy said that these creatures speak terrible words and Kang Nam definitely does not deserve them. Meanwhile, the crowd on the street called the hero a freak and ordered him to get out of here along with his house. They also laughed at the fact that he went inside and decided to hide like a coward. As soon as the doors closed, the screams died down a little. Locked, and Kang Nam was left alone in complete darkness. At the same time, an unknown girl was sitting in the forest and drinking tea. Goblins gathered around her. However, she did not pay attention to them at all. After taking a few sips, the woman put the cup on the table and said that the tea in this place was not very tasty, as if they had not even tried. After that, she stood up with a smile, and it turned out that all this time she had been sitting near the mountain of goblin corpses. Those who survived trembled with fear and watched as she slowly walked away from them. And a moment later, a huge dragon appeared in the place where she left. The girl said that since the tea here is simply terrible, I must definitely find a place where it will be much tastier. Meanwhile, Kang Nam was at home, and the puppy was sitting good and protecting the house from others. He began to fall asleep, but immediately revived himself by hitting him in the face, after which he jumped up and began waving the fungus, but realized that there was no one here. Actually, the princess came up to him and asked, did he stand guard alone all night? After that, they and the princess approached the house, and the princess began to ask our hero to get out of here. And she also said that there were no serious consequences and everyone was unharmed, so he didn't have to be driven. No one answered her, and she folded her hands near her mouth so that her scream was louder and said that everything was in order so that he should not worry and come out when he was ready. However, there was no answer. After that, the princess looked at the puppy and said that a day had already passed since Kang Nam locked himself in his house, and the shock that he experienced must have been very strong. Together with the puppy, the princess sat down near the door and sighed heavily, and the unknown person sitting next to them also sighed heavily. It was the leader of the wolves, and the princess and the puppy immediately got scared and asked what he was doing here. The leader of the wolves, without opening his eyes, apologized for scaring them, and the princess said that in fact she was not the least bit scared. After this, the woolly one began to rise, and said that it would be impossible for any other person to have such strength. After that, they all stood up and looked at this house without saying a word. After a couple of minutes of pause, the leader of the wolves said that the consequences of consuming it would be as great as the amount he consumed. The kings and their people stood not far from this house and looked at all this with sadness. The sun had already fully risen, and the crowd began to discuss why the divine tree had not yet bloomed, although the sun was already hidden in the sky. Someone said that maybe this is the wrong place, or maybe they just got the date wrong. However, the others immediately said that this is impossible, and in all calendars this is the place, and this is the date. But then they do not understand why in this case the tree does not bloom. Someone said that perhaps it was because on this hill, a human house was built, which interferes with the need for this. But the Raven King, as soon as he heard this, immediately waved his head and said that this should not affect. After that, the kings headed inside the tree that the Elf Queen created, and the lizard was indignant. He asked how he should understand what happened. After all, 3 whole days have passed since the promised yes, and the world tree still has not blossomed. The king of people said that it was about to happen, and the king I went to Turkey yesterday snapped at him and said that he had no right to speak. After all, he should be glad that the other kings allowed him to be here. The Elf Queen drank and said that the lizard should refrain from making rude remarks. The Raven King said that he did not understand what could have happened. After that, he said that once the lizard made the same mistake because he withdrew his troops after the disappearance of the former Demon King and was seriously injured. I immediately said that he would never forget this day because he then lost a lot of comrades in the earth. The Dwarf King wiped his glasses and said that perhaps the power of the World Tree had been absorbed by someone again. The Human King immediately said that it could be the new Demon King. But they immediately told him that they were closely watching this boy, and from the day he appeared he did not move from behind his castle, so it was definitely not him. The king of people gathered everything and said that in this case he should leave because he could not leave his empire for a long time without a king. The amphibian also got ready and said that it was time for them to leave because if there is no world tree, then there is no need for them to cooperate anymore. The dwarf king approached the elf queen and asked what they should do in this case if it was true, to which the queen replied that in this case they should wait a little more before making a decision. Suddenly, an unknown girl appeared in the same place and asked why they were all gathered here. The others immediately looked at her, and she greeted everyone and said that they had not seen each other for a long time, and the king still remained a hypocritical bunch of idiots. The dwarf king looked at this girl and asked who she even was. The king of lizards immediately looked at the king of the gnomes and said that he should not pretend. He doesn't know who the girl is. The blood of the gnomes laughed and said that he is very old, so his memory is no longer very good. The girl immediately got angry and slammed her hand on the table asking whether he doesn't recognize her, because she is Mariana Antoinette Oscar III. The dwarf king looked at the girl and asked if it was really Mariana. The girl immediately said that he noticed correctly and reminded him that she was his queen. After this, Mariana raised her finger up and said that she was the legendary demon king, implying that kings and demons are an entire group or race of demons. The dwarf king immediately pointed his finger at her and said that now he finally remembered this girl. He called the elf queen over and whispered something in her ear. The lizard king Braided also dug a little into his memory and said that the girl was the child of the demon king who escaped from the castle. He also said that he heard that someone had taken her throne. These words. The girl immediately became angry and used her aura to put everyone in their place in this room, after which she asked if they wanted to say anything else and also asked who they thought was going to run away. However, the elf queen immediately raised her hand up and dispelled this aura, saying that there was no place for such terrible actions. After that, she looked at her eyes and asked, what did the child of demons forget here? The girl smiled and said that they were all here for the same reason. She also added that she had been looking forward to this moment since that very day on the hill, and finally, she came here to take her place. After that, she looked at all the other kings and asked if they would help her with this. The lizard king laughed and said that this is real absurdity, and also asked her who she takes them for. The girl did not answer. The lizard king, meanwhile, took his weapon and said that he would kill her right on the spot. The girl looked at him with a smile and asked, does he really think he can? After that, she asked everyone who was interested to go outside and make sure that all the elves who were guarding this place were now lying unconscious on the street. Those who guarded this tree inside immediately attacked the girl and said that she did not dare do this to their brothers. However, she immediately snapped her fingers and they all fell to the floor unconscious. Yesterday, I looked around and shouted that they need a t-shirt to deal with this girl. However, she said that all this was completely unimportant, and also asked, do they think that she did not have countermeasures? By saying this, she meant that she had installed a protective dome that prevented anyone from entering here. After that, she sat down on the mountain of unconscious elves and said that, unfortunately, she was a little different from that person. After all, she doesn't like sissies. Nobody answered her. And Mariana, looking menacingly at the kings, said that she would be frank with them. She only needed the power of the world tree, so she wanted to find out where it was. Meanwhile, Kang Nam was lying at home, already the whole day and was unable to move from his stress. The princess stood below and asked when he would come out, because she had tried to cook the most delicious food on this earth and wanted to share. Behind her was a terrible-looking kitchen, and the princess was saying that he would definitely regret it if he didn't try now. The leader smelled this food and even began to think that the girl might want to poison him with such delicacies. The puppy, meanwhile, covered his nose and said that he refused to eat it. The princess translated this so that everyone could understand and said that this was very cruel on his part towards her. Meanwhile, Kang Nam lay in his fullness and still did not move with the thought that perhaps he should turn out the light because it's somehow too dark here. The house immediately obeyed him and turned on the light. After that, the hero said that it was somehow too cold here, so you need to turn off the heater. After this, the building immediately turned on the air conditioner on warm mode. Kang Nam looked at all this and asked his home to send him to his mother. However, nothing happened and he still lay helplessly on the floor. A few minutes passed and Kang Nam began to cry, thinking that he wanted to return to his mother. The princess heard these words and thought that this guy could not be convinced even with such delicious food, so there was nothing to be done. She looked at what she had prepared and said that she was very sorry that they could not eat it all themselves. After that, she immediately took a spoon and put a piece of this food into your mouth, and was clearly pleased with what she got. And the puppy looked at all this and was surprised and could not understand how she could eat all this. After that, the doorbell rang and the princess carefully went outside. There was an unknown girl who covered her nose from the terrible smell. The woman apologized and asked for forgiveness for disturbing her. But she also said that she could no longer stand the nauseating smell. Immediately after that, she used her powers and rushed inside. After that, with the help of her strength, she picked up what the elf had prepared and threw the contents of this dish out of the house. And then she opened her mouth and burned it, using her fire breath. After that, the girl wiped her mouth and said that she simply could not allow such ugly creations to exist. The princess looked at all this and simply began to cry. Meanwhile, the shinobi kept an eye on the kings. She thought that the world tree had not dawned and that the boys had probably already taken their first step. After that, she remembered her sister and thought that she could not return home like this. After all, if she cannot get the power to get rid of them, then she must change something in her life. Mariana, meanwhile, looked at the kings and asked, did they really just tell her the truth? The elf queen looked into her eyes and said that the world tree was truly dead. Mariana looked back into her eyes and asked, do they really think that she will believe such nonsense? The other kings immediately looked at the elf queen and asked how it could die, instead of just not germinating. Mariana, meanwhile, began to get angry and ask how they dare to lie to her, and decided that they simply did not want to give her the tree so easily. Claws immediately appeared from her hands, and she said that in this case she would take him by force. After that, the Queen of the Elves took out a scroll and showed that there was a hole in it from the fire, which means that the world tree was definitely burned. And the Queen also said that Mariana must know what kind of scroll it is. Mariana immediately fell silent, and the Queen of the Elves said that as they can see, someone burned the world tree. The lizard immediately began to shout that this was simply impossible, and the world tree could not die so easily. And the Raven King said that perhaps someone took it for themselves. The Dwarf King said that this was nonsense, and in that case the scroll would be intact. Then he looked ahead and said that perhaps this was fate. The King of People became nervous and said that the world tree had died, and if I am your number, it only means war. After that, he ran out of this place and shouted to all his people to prepare to return to the castle immediately. The Queen of the Elves said that it was not surprising that the King of People chickened out, because in the end this world was born from the world tree, and it is the mother of all forests, and she gave birth to all the rivers and seas, as well as every living creature. The Elf Queen looked at the King of People who was running away, and said that people were the last ones to be born by the world tree, so they definitely couldn't help but be scared, and they shouldn't blame them for this. After all, in the end, they will all soon lose the blessing of the world tree. And when this time comes, they will be no different from people. After that, the Elf Queen looked at Mariana and said that the woman would also lose all her powers. Mariana looked menacingly at the Queen of the Elves and said that they were simply lying to her, and she also asked how dare they all deceive her. No one answered anything, and Mariana continued to get angry, saying that she didn't need any blessings because all she needed from this tree was just power. Insignificant creatures do not dare to feel this, because the aura of the world tree emanates from this hill, and they are all just trying to take possession of its power and deceive it. The Elf Queen began to say that until now they had received blessings from 2 world trees, but recently one of them was like this. And recently, another one has died. The Elf Queen also added that the Demon King, named Mariana, monopolized the Eastern World Tree. The lizard immediately added his words, saying that because of this act, he was also stolen, and because she was the only one, she could not protect this tree. Mariana became enraged after such words and attacked the Elf Queen. But the Elf Queen said that if the girls just needed strength, then she could stop and listen to them all. Mariana stopped her attack, and the Queen of the Elves said that Mariana probably wants to meet with the one who owns the power of the World Tree. And Kang Nam continued to be in his room in complete depression without the strength to get up. In the kitchen, meanwhile, the woman who destroyed the princess's food was now standing at the stove and cooking. The head of the wolves and the puppy sat and waited impatiently for her to finally finish her dish, and only the princess sat and sighed displeasedly. The princess was clearly unhappy because she was a bad cook, but the girl was good at it, and she reminded her that the master's kitchen would break down if she didn't use it carefully. The woman with horns, meanwhile, continued to cook, and with both hands threw food in the frying pan to fry it on all sides. And she said that the technology of mankind had developed quite subtly, because she had never seen such excellent tools before. However, after that, she turned around and adjusted her glasses, saying that people always remain people and it is not difficult to understand the mechanics of their inventions. The princess remembered how a few days ago the master scolded her for breaking everything in the kitchen and confirmed the girl's words by saying that she also figured it out very easily. The woman with horns, meanwhile, poured several seasonings onto the table and asked in surprise what it was. Without waiting for an answer, she dipped her finger in them. and she stuffed it into her mouth with the thought that she couldn't believe that people had become so sophisticated, so she must definitely know how to cook such good dishes as they did. After that, she took the seasonings in her hands and said that she would cook it so deliciously that the garbage that was in the house before couldn't even compare with it. The puppy and the head of the wolves immediately turned away and remembered what the princess had just prepared, because of which it was horrible. The princess immediately rose from her seat and said that it was simply unfair, because her cooking was not so different from what the horned woman was cooking. However, in the meantime, the woman didn't even answer anything, and really went off turning the food in her hand on the frying pan. After that, she looked at the princess in a terrible way and said that her terrible methods must be exterminated. However, she immediately said that she would forgive the princess for allowing her to use this wonderful kitchen, as this would leave the horned woman completely satisfied. The princess immediately rose from her seat and hit the table with her hand. Ask which one? Why does she think that she can say such things at the first meeting? The woman adjusted her glasses and said that she was just a passing chef. After that, a few more minutes passed and she set the table with everything she had just prepared. Everyone looked in surprise at these first-class dishes. The woman with the horns tried to calmly said that she hoped that they could enjoy her food, and hoped that they would think about their actions. However, immediately after that, she disappeared. Everyone who was in this dining room looked at it in surprise and could not understand where she had gone. The woman with horns disappeared along with the food, and everyone immediately got up and began to look for where she had gone. The princess said that the girl left immediately after teasing them with food, and this is very cruel. Meanwhile, Kangnam was still trying to call his mother, but there was no mobile connection here, as always. Kangnam, you already remembered that once upon a time he did not want to go out and spend all his free time alone with himself, after one incident that happened several years ago. He remembered that his mother still brought food to her destroyed son, and asked if he was still going to play games all day. She did not swear at him and said that he could just take a short break to eat and make his mother happy with this. Now Kang Nam remembered this with the thoughts that he clearly did not deserve such an attitude. And one time, when he went out to pick up food, he saw that his mother had fallen asleep entering his room, exhausted, and in her hands there was a family photo. He did not pay attention to this in the bribe and began to eat it. The woman immediately woke up and said that her son should not eat cold food, so she said that she could go and heat it for him. The guy immediately raised his gaze and looked at his mother. However, tears appeared in his eyes immediately after this. He immediately returned to his room and loudly slammed the door, cutting through the whole house. And now Kang Nam remembered that his mother always talked to him even when she didn't see him. And now he's the only one who can't talk to her. By the way, with these thoughts, his hands somehow weakened too much and the phone fell right on his head. He immediately turned around from the pain and began to roll on the floor, covering his face. However, after a couple of seconds, he removed his hands from his face and told himself that he must be a man because he can no longer keep his mother waiting and cannot just lie around here with nothing to do. After that, he immediately stood up and shouted that he would try again. And firstly, he decided that he must find a way to control his strength so as not to harm others. The man immediately looked at his hand and decided that if only he could find and tune his power of law. However, he immediately discarded these thoughts, deciding that first he should apologize to everyone. After that, he smiled and decided that when he finds a way to return home, he will definitely take them all with him together and they will enjoy the food. However, after that, he suddenly noticed that it was somehow too hot here. He asked the house to lower the temperature, but this did not help. After that, he looked outside and saw that there was something shining very brightly there. He opened the window and looked down and was horrified to discover that his house was on fire. After that, he looked a little further and saw that a woman unknown to him was standing there along with her dragon, who was now breathing fire on this house. He immediately grabbed his head and couldn't believe that someone was attacking his house again. Looking at this huge monster, he realized with horror that even dragons can exist in this world. And one of them is right now destroying his house, trying to burn it to the ground. However, his fear immediately changed to surprise because he had never seen them in person before. And these dragons really look very cool. Immediately after this, the dragon noticed him and shook fire towards our hero. Mariana also noticed the hero and said that the thief who stole the power of the world tree should leave this house. And if he doesn't come out, he will be very severely punished. Along with these words, she showed 2 fingers up, and the dragon immediately opened its mouth, preparing to attack. Meanwhile, our hero's companions were inside the house and could no longer breathe from the smoke. They did not understand what was happening, but they knew for sure that they had to get out of here before it got even worse. The leader of the wolves broke the window with one blow so that they could all get out of here. However, the dragon immediately shook fire in his direction, causing the wolf to retreat back into the room. Mariana, meanwhile, looked up and thought that this house looked quite strong, but had not yet given up. Meanwhile, the kings watched as Mariana and her dragon destroyed our hero's house. The Elf King was most indignant because his daughter was inside and he had to save her. But his servants held his hands and said that everything would be fine with her. The Raven King looked at the Dwarf King and asked if he would remain on the sidelines, to which he replied that this flame was ideal for forging. The Amphibian looked at the Dwarf King and asked how he could joke at such a time. Shinobi watched all this tree and thought that even the Demon King always came and she was probably also looking for the World Tree. But why then was she attacking Kang Nam? However, she immediately stopped and remembered that that freak had predicted this. Meanwhile, Kang Nam came down from his room and started asking, "Where is the princess and is she okay?" But as soon as he went down, he saw that inside his house there was a werewolf and was holding a puppy and a princess in his arms, covering them from carbon smoke and fire. Mariana, meanwhile, ordered the dragon to attack this house even more strongly and not leave only chips of it. Buttons to her surprise, Kang Nam walked out of the front door. Mariana snapped her fingers and asked him to stop for a couple of seconds. After that, the girl said that it was very good that Kang Nam decided to give up. She and the hero looked at her in surprise and asked who she even was. The girl laughed and said that in front of her, "I turned out to be an ordinary, insignificant person, and he didn't even look intimidated after meeting her, and that deserves respect." After that, she looked him straight in the eyes and said that she was a very evil creature. Mariana averted her gaze and began to enjoy her power with the words that he just needed to calmly transfer power over the World Tree and she would give him a chance to atone for his sins as a court artist. However, while she was saying this, Kang Nam interrupted her and said that where he was born, there is a superstition that children playing with friends wipe the bed. Mariana immediately looked at him angrily and asked, "How dare a simple person interrupt her speech?" Meanwhile, Kang Nam put something in the dragon's mouth. The dragon began to resist, and Kang Nam grabbed him by the jaw and said that the children had to go to neighboring houses to ask for salt after they wet the bed. With these words, he poured a bag of salt into the dragon's mouths. After that, he pressed the dragon's mouth and said that after that the children stopped playing with fire. And then, he used his fire fist to strike the dragon's skull. Mariana looked in surprise as Kang Nam, with one deft movement, shoved the dragon's head under the ground. She stood in shock for a couple of seconds and asked what this man allows himself to do. Kang Nam didn't even look at her and said that if she wants to get the power of the World Tree, then she can come and take it. After that, he turned to face her and said that he was the embodiment of the World Tree. The creatures that were still standing not far from the man's house looked in surprise at the fact that a huge dragon had appeared here. They discussed the fact that dragons are considered an extinct species, along with the former Demon King. However, after a couple of seconds, they were surprised to notice that the dragon immediately lost and could not understand how this was possible. One of them immediately said that it doesn't matter anymore and he needs to run away from here, because everyone doesn't care about the World Tree, because it's becoming too dangerous here and they shouldn't run away. The kings looked at the creatures who immediately began to run away. Kang Nam, meanwhile, stood opposite Mariana and looked her straight in the eyes. The girl was silent for a while and asked, "Is he really the embodiment of the World Tree?" And immediately after that she laughed loudly, leaving the guy in bewilderment. She wiped away her tears from laughter and said that it was a pretty good performance, but the World Tree is the creator of this world and everything is generated by the World Tree, so he definitely cannot be it. The Elf King, meanwhile, broke through the window into the house and began to look for his princess. He immediately saw that she was sitting in the clutches of a huge beast and took her in his arms, saying that it was time for them to run away from here. Meanwhile, Mariana looked at the man and said that he, too, is a product of the World Tree, and he cannot say that he is different. She also showed us the creatures that were running away and said that the reason they all gathered here is because they want to get at least a small fraction of the power of the World Tree. That standing in front of her is just an ordinary person, and he definitely cannot be the embodiment of the World Tree. She also said that she admits that his level of strength is impressive because for a person he is quite strong, and he must have eaten a piece of the roots from the World Tree. Kang Nam immediately remembered that instead, he uprooted it and burned it in a fire. After that, Mariana used telekinesis and threw the guy away with one snap of her finger. After that, the guy immediately stood up, concentrated all his strength in his right hand, and said that now he was really furious. However, immediately in front of his face, he remembered the head of the wolves, who said that this was not his power, and he had not yet learned to possess it because he was too young. Mariana looked at our hero and said that sometimes creatures appear who simply accidentally receive power that does not even belong to them, and they do not even understand how much effort is actually required to create it. Kang Nam got up from the floor and shook himself off the dust. with the thoughts that he knows very well that he is a fraudster and a cheater in this world. But if he only knew how to control his strength, he would immediately change as a person. Suddenly, he looked at the front door from which the Elf King and the princess came out, and he immediately asked why she didn't run away from here. The Elf King took his daughter closer and said that it was time for them to leave from here because it was dangerous here, but the princess asked her father to wait because that she can't just leave like that. She took the man's personal belongings and said that if you leave his things in this form, who will get it from him? So she decided to take them out of the house. Kang Nam looked at all this and blushed, saying that now is not the time to worry about his personal belongings. Mariana looked at all this with a smile and snapped her fingers, saying that the dragon should get up and finish with this guy as quickly as possible. Kang Nam immediately raised his hands, thinking that as he thought, the dragon was not going to give up so easily. Mariana noticed that her dragon was not responding to the voice and said that it was time for him to drink tea, so she asked him to quickly get up and finish off this guy. However, the dragon still did not react, and the woman looked at him in surprise and asked what he was doing there. Kang Nam was also surprised because he didn't expect that he could actually destroy a dragon's body with one blow. Mariana approached your dragon and began to wake him up, and Kang Nam was running around her, who said that without the dragon she was nothing, and now she definitely couldn't do anything. But immediately after that, he immediately asked if she really couldn't do anything, but in there were notes of apprehension in its cavity. Immediately after that, the princess came up to him and hit him on the head, saying that the way he spoke made her want to hit him again. However, after this, Kang Nam calmed down and watched as Mariana tried to explain to her dragon that he needed to stick his head out from under the earth. After looking at all this, Kang Nam turned to the princess and apologized to her for the fact that he again created problems for the people around him, after which he said in a confident voice that this will not happen again. Having finished his speech, he approached Mariana and her dragon. After that, he looked at her and declared that this is his territory and those who enter here will not be able to defeat him for anything in life, so the girl should simply give up. He stayed looking at her and prayed inside that she would leave here quickly. However, when I listened, I heard the quiet cry of Mariana. He immediately grabbed his head and asked why she was crying. The girl continued to cry, and he immediately began to apologize and say that it was his fault. But after thinking a little, he said that it was actually her fault, and he did not understand why she was behaving this way. After she attacked him first, the woman was hysterical, and raising her head up, she loudly shouted the name of the dragon. This sound echoed throughout the area. Even Kang Nam, who was near his house, covered his ears because he suddenly felt pain. And the scream was so strong that it put out the fire in the house. The Dwarf King covered his ears and said that this girl's vocal cords are very strong as always. Mariana, meanwhile, continued to try to bring her dragon back to life and said that together they had not yet found the best tea in the world, so the dragon must wake up. Kang Nam still continued to cover his ears and asked why the woman was crying so loudly. However, unexpectedly, the dragon took your head out of the ground and screamed loudly. Kang Nam realized that this was not the end, and immediately took a fighting stance. However, the dragon didn't really intend to fight and his eyes were like a lover's. Kang Nam noticed this moment and looked at the dragon in fear. Mariana immediately jumped and hugged her dragon in the hall, saying that she knew that he was not dead. She also added that she knew that the dragon would not allow people like this guy to harm themselves. Mariana smiled and looked at our hero with the words that this was a real tragedy for him, because now he was definitely finished after what he had done. Kang Nam concentrated his strength and took a fighting stance once again, fully preparing himself for the final battle with the dragon. But inside, he didn't understand why everyone was doing this to him, because he would gladly give up the power of the World Tree and return to his mother, but he simply cannot do it. Mariana, meanwhile, laughed loudly and pointed her finger at the man, saying that the dragon was obliged to finish him off. However, the dragon immediately disappeared. Mariana looked forward in surprise and asked what's going on. She saw that her dragon had taken on a human form and was now kneeling in front of Kang Nam, holding his hand. The dragon girl, with an embarrassed face, apologized for what she was doing but asked permission for the man to give it to her again. Kang Nam looked at her in surprise and asked what she was talking about. And the dragon girl, with a smile, asked for permission to bite off the salt again. Kang Nam immediately moved away from her, in the sense that the dragon had just turned into a human. And in fantasy novels this is called polymorphism, and he did not think that such a thing existed in such a world. The princess immediately started pointing her finger at the dragon girl and told him that this was the same woman, and the wolf asked if she had been a dragon before, so he didn't even notice the difference. Kang Nam picked up a pack of salt and asked, "Does she really want to try this again?" The dragon girl took off her glasses and looked at the pack closer, saying that she was surprised that it was called that and said that it was the most exquisite powder in her life. Mariana was tired of this circus and said that she did not understand what the dragon was doing, and she also added that she was now obliged to finish off this guy. The dragon girl looked at her mistress and said nothing. After that, she turned and looked at the guy and said that she was a dragon. Kang Nam immediately said that he had realized this a long time ago. Mariana, meanwhile, stood behind the dragon and continued to yell so that the girl would listen to her. The dragon girl, sitting on her knees, said that they are dragons and can live for millennia, and if they want, they can be reborn and will live forever. But she decided to end her life. Kang Nam looked at her in surprise and asked what she was talking about. The dragon girl began her story. She said that once upon a time there was a dragon who was tired of the endless cycle and sent to die. He didn't want to shed his own blood, and also didn't want someone to find his body. And he also didn't want to feel pain while he was dying. So he decided to starve you. And when he was already on the verge of death, a demon suddenly came to him, greeted the great dragon, and asked if he knew where the most delicious food in the world was. The dragon did not answer, and the demon went inside asking for an answer from the wise dragon. The dragon was silent for a couple of seconds, looked at the demon, and said that he knew where the most delicious food in the world was. The demon looked at the majestic dragon and asked, "Where the most delicious food in the world is?" However, Drakenov returned from the demon and said that he would never find such food in his life because it was simply beyond the capabilities of an ordinary demon. The demon did not despair and asked why. He could not find this food. He asked, "Is it really so difficult to get, and is it really in a destroyed valley?" The dragon was silent, and the demon continued to ask and listed the most dangerous places on this planet. The dragon was still silent. "Is this what it is?" And the man asked, "Is it really possible that if this food is not in all these places, then perhaps it is located together where the blessing of the world tree is missing?" The dragon, without turning his head, said that his life is too short, so no matter how hard he tries, nothing will come of it. However, the demon said that, although his life is short, his memory is eternal, and someone will take care of this memory. After that, the dragon turned to the demon and said that the road would be very long, but if someone continues to walk, someone will sit on the new earth. The demon asked in surprise, "Was such an earth not created by the world tree?" The dragon told everything he knew, and after that the demon left, and then the dragon plunged again and came out in his favorite place. He again wanted to die. But he continued to worry about one question. Did the demon king find this food and decided that he would die when he found out the answer to this question? Hundreds of years later, the dragon took human form and descended into the world following the scent of the demon. Moving through this world, the dragon learned that that demon had become a king. The dragon went to the castle to this demon. The servants led her deeper into the castle, and the king appeared from the smoky workshop and greeted the dragon. His torn clothes were stained with food, and his appearance did not have the dignity inherent in a person of his level. Dragons looked at the topic, and did he ask the most delicious food in the world? The demon king nodded his head negatively and said that he had failed. The dragon immediately replied that he thought so. After this, the dragon turned around and said that he understood everything and began to leave. But the demon asked him to stop and said, "I believe that if this is possible, he wants her to try the food that he prepared." The dragon briefly replied that he would not do this. The demon king looked at the dragon's back and said that his wife was pregnant. The dragon did not want to listen to the story from this demon king and told her that this did not concern him. But the demon did not calm down and stated that he was ready to give her anything. But his wife told him that she wanted to try something truly exquisite. So he gathered all his servants and they prepared for a long journey and collected a lot of rations, but the road was difficult and far. Therefore, every time he sent back a tired roomer, he gave part of the rations to them. That is why, among those who remained on the journey, only the demon king remained. And then he met the dragon. And after her words, he felt some kind of nostalgia. A man with happy eyes looked up and said that it was the smell of his homeland. He returned to his wife empty-handed, but she had already given birth and left this world while he was gone. However, she left behind a child whom he had never seen before. The girl smiled at him. Therefore, the demon king decided to make the most delicious dish for this girl. The demon king said with a smile that the food was not the best of the best, but when the girl ate it, she always smiled. Croy of Demons finished his story, but the dragon was still standing and thinking about something of her own. Finally, the demon king looked at her back again and asked if she wanted to try his food after this story. The dragon actually tasted the king's food and left. But as soon as she left, she thought to herself that he was a terrible cook. While she was telling all this, the others managed to take out the table and chairs and drink tea while listening to this story. The dragon girl took a couple of sips from a cup of tea and said that the taste is simply terrible. and this taste is even worse than the child's food for the first time I tried to cook something." The princess immediately looked at her embarrassedly and said that she tried very hard while preparing it. Meanwhile, Mariana turned the cup of tea over and said that it was true, and that it tasted more like goblin urine. Even Kang Nam tried this tea and grimaced with disgust. However, after that, he hit the table with his hand and asked why they had a tea party near his hothouse. The dragon girl continued to tell her story and said that when she returned home and began to die of hunger, one thought came to her. She wondered, are they still eating that terrible food? The princess told our hero that they had just been ignored and Kang Nam used his power to prepare for battle. And the dragon girl said that she again went in search of the demon. It was as if he had fallen through the ground and she saw only ruins filled with corpses. After this, on another occasion, he took back his form and spread his wings to return to his nest. And at that moment her stomach began to growl from hunger. The dragon sadly thought that perhaps his time had finally come, but a child approached, covered from head to toe in the garden. This child was Mariana. She handed the dragon a piece of food and said that if he was hungry, he could eat this. The huge dragon looked at the little girl and did not understand why it was so brainless. The dragon could not reject the sincerity of this girl, so he agreed and swallowed the food. After that, the dragons looked at the little girl and said that it tasted simply terrible. Mariana said with a smile that she also knew about it, but she liked it because her father cooked it. After that, the girl took out a few more supplies and gave them to the dragon. The dragon looked at her in surprise and asked if she wasn't going to eat it herself, after which the girl began to bend her fingers on her hand and count the days. When she finally counted, she said that there was only 1 day left and her father told her to leave the food until he returned. The dragon's hunger subsided after the small amount of food that the girl gave him, and she would have to wait a very long time before she died of hunger. Meanwhile, Mariana began to have fun and say that Dad said that after he returns, someone will work even harder and she will give the dragon as much as he needs to eat. The dragon looked up and said that it was a real shame because he would have to wait forever. After this, the dragon took on human form and said that it was finally time for them to leave. The dragon girl hugged little Mariana and promised to feed her something better than her father's terrible food. The dragon girl folded her hands on her chest and said that after that, they went on a journey to find the best food in the world. Well, Kang Nam still continued to shout and ask her why she even started telling this story in such a situation, and what answer about him, because now he has more important problems, for example, his burning house. After that, Mariana pointed her finger at the man with a smile and said that the dragon should finish him off quickly. However, the dragon girl leaned over the spirit of Mariana and whispered something to her, leaving the girl bewildered. Mariana looked away and said that if her dragon says so, then nothing can be done about it. After that, Mariana stood up and said that if a person wants, she can give him the opportunity to feed her the person's food, and after that, she will kill him. Kang Nam looked at this in surprise and said that he didn't see the point in it. After that, he sat down on the ground with the thoughts that he didn't understand what to do because they burned his house. So he didn't have any seasonings or anything else left. Immediately after these words, the dragon girl waved her hand, and the hothouse immediately returned to its former appearance. Kang Nam was delighted and said that he did not expect that the dragon girl had such strong magic, and the princess said that not a single trace remained of the fire, as if it had not burned at all. Kang Nam ran into the house and started running around, realizing that perhaps the fire was simply not real, but just recently it was very hot here, so he still doesn't understand what kind of strange magic it was. The king of the amphibians looked at this in surprise, and the queen of the elves who stood next to him said that before they arrived here she explored all the regions where there had been a dragon before, and everywhere he passed there were mountains of corpses and ashes. Well, there was also a feeling that everything here was destroyed even before the arrival of this dragon, and perhaps that this happened after the disappearance of the World Tree. The Raven King thought about this and said that in this case people would try to settle together where there was more fertile soil. The Amphibian King looked at the Dwarf King and asked if he knew about this from the very beginning. The dwarf laughed and said that he was surprised that the amphibian did not know about this. He also added that now the conflict has been suspended. He also said with a smile that the Demon King is not the one who will do this. The Elf Queen looked forward and thought that they had already known enough to spare, and even more than all other races. Therefore, Demon Kings would never harm anyone just like that. Kang Nam, meanwhile, continued to hug his house and rejoiced that it was completely intact. The dragon girl adjusted her glasses and said that it was an illusion spell. Kang Nam looked at her and with tears in his eyes asked why she made such a cruel joke on him. After that, Kang Nam sighed heavily and said that she can follow him, because he still has something left. Because despite the fact that he cooks terribly, there are still semi-finished products here, The dragon girl immediately replied that he shouldn't worry if she's already lived forever and eaten enough bad food. However, they suddenly stopped because they were surprised to find that all the kings came to them, saying that they wanted to join the embodiment of the world tree. Kang Nam looked them in the eye and said that he was just joking, and he is not actually the embodiment of the world tree. Mariana laughed and asked, "Are the kings really so stupid that they believed this pathetic man?" However, no one paid attention to her words, and each king dropped to one knee in front of the embodiment of the world tree, confessing his loyalty to the guy. Kang Nam looked at them confusedly and said that he didn't understand what they were doing because he just got angry and said the first thing that came to his mind. Mariana approached the man and hit him on the head with her fan, thinking that she couldn't even believe that all the kings decided to bow to some ordinary person. After which she looked at them with a smile and asked, "Have they all gone crazy?" However, the kings still continued to ignore her, which is why the girl got angry and asked how they could throw away their royal pride. Meanwhile, the creatures that had not yet managed to escape began to slowly approach our hero's house, saying that this guy said that he was the embodiment of the world tree. And now they are kneeling in front of him, so there is no doubt in his words. All sorts of creatures discuss that now. It is not surprising why the world tree has not grown, because now it is obvious that man is its embodiment. Kang Nam turned his head around and didn't understand why everyone was coming to him. The princess approached the dragon girl and asked, "Is this guy really the embodiment of the world tree?" However, immediately after this question, the dragon girl fell to her knee in front of Kang Nam. Kang Nam, meanwhile, continued to be nervous and think that if they realized that it was he who destroyed the world tree, then things would be very bad. Therefore, he decided to change his strategy and laughed and said that finally they all understood who he was. Inside, he was very worried. After all, if the truth was revealed, something terrible would happen to him. Meanwhile, all sorts of creatures continued to come up and discuss, "Is this guy really the embodiment of the tree?" The Raven King, without raising his head, said that everyone here is waiting for an answer from the embodiment of the tree, so he must show them his strength. Kang Nam immediately looked at them in surprise and said that this was quite problematic, but inside he was thinking that he didn't know what to do because he could only run fast and shoot a beam from his hand. But here literally everyone owns magic and can do something like that. He looked around in surprise and saw how, with every second, the creatures continued to surround him from all sides, waiting for a miracle. He thought that he was very uncomfortable when they looked at him like that, because he couldn't withstand all these looks because until quite recently he was a closed person. And now he has to communicate with so many people and also pretend that he is the embodiment of what there is a divine tree there. Kang Nam looked at his house with thoughts that he was obliged to help him. Inside, he began to beg the house for help and say that he would clean and do everything on his own, and he would also make sure that he would not break anything else in this life. However, nothing happened and there was complete silence. A couple of seconds later, the princess approached our hero and said that he was actually not the embodiment of the world tree. He immediately looked at her and said that she was only making everything worse. The princess continued to say that he cannot be the embodiment, but he has boxes of very tasty food, and he also saved her. He also has a device called a refrigerator that always keeps fresh traces, but he is certainly not the embodiment, and they should not do this belief. Everyone in the crowd began to look at each other and think in surprise that they had just been deceived, and the kings were just fools who knelt down in front of the first person they met. Kang Nam was nervous and didn't understand how to get out of this situation. Suddenly, he remembered something important and looked around, deciding that this thing would save him from this situation. Meanwhile, the princess continued to say that if this guy is really the embodiment of the tree, then she is mistaken and is ready to admit her mistakes. Suddenly, a guy's hand appeared in front of her face and asked her to calm down and said that everything was fine and she didn't have to make excuses anymore. After that, he stood up to his full height and said that if everyone already knows about this, then nothing can be done, and he will have to prove to them that he is a sacred tree.